We are going to call the meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, August 7th. This is the new date. It was supposed to be on Monday for the regularly scheduled town council meeting. Town manager, town attorney, town clerk, all the council members are present. If you please rise for the invocation, followed by Councilor Woodson and the Pledge of Allegiance.
As we gather here today, we pray that we are ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to fellow citizens and to our community. We ask you to guide those who, as our government leaders, make their daily decisions that affect us, so that their efforts shall be motivated by the same great rule of charity and goodwill. Let us continue to strive to make a better world. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
How cozy it is.
I know, it's really cozy.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of the final agenda. Is there a motion to approve the final agenda?
So moved.
A motion by Councilor King,
I'll second.
seconded by Councilor Safford. I know we got some. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Oh, I was going to say, we have a presenter that was originally scheduled for the M&P. I don't know if he's here or not, that we were going to maybe move to this morning.
Okay. I don't know. And then also Dr. Kohler is not going to be here today. Correct. And then we also have Steve Johnson from Murph is here to speak under advisory committee's items and reports. No, not yet. We're just finalizing the final agenda. Just making sure everybody knows what's coming up.
Oh, please.
Yes. So we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Next is public comment. Madam Clerk.
First up, I have Ellen Vaughn. Ms. Vaughn will be followed by Ramona Kaiser.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for all that you've done to get us through this next thing. Whatever. I'm here on behalf of the Friends of the Mount. Oh, I live at 7500 Estero Boulevard. I'm here on behalf of Friends of the Mount House, and I'm here to do a little seed, making sure the seeds are germinating, because the Friends of the Mount House are going to be hosting the Island Hopper event at the end of September. And listen, when you hear the date that we have drawn, we are on Saturday, September 28th. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we're going to reclaim that date. So I will be here again at the next meeting to speak about the fact that we are getting a one-day liquor license, so that we will be able to sell beverages, so that we will reap more benefits, which will go to the Mount House. So just hold that date and try to reclaim it as a positive day. Thank you.
Do you have a time?
It will be the afternoon, so we don't know definitively. We don't know who our performers are yet, but I'm sure they'll be wonderful. I'm going to guess that it will be, mid-afternoon ish.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Ramona Kaiser.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ramona Kaiser on Sterling Avenue, and no liquor on my street, just lots of water. And that's what I want to talk
No,
about.
there was liquor on that street too.
Unfortunately, about the flooding and what is supposed to be done about it. I heard there's going to be a new drain line coming down our street, which will be installed right on my property. And my problem with that is, yes, our street floods a lot. And I have been here for 30 years. The last few years have been worse. Where I am located, right in the middle of the street, across the street from me, is already a drain installed with a new ductbill going into the canal. I can tell you it does not work. It always backs up, it floods the street and makes it worse. Now that's across the street from me. Across the canal from me is also a drain line with a ductbill that drains into the canal. I live on a very narrow canal. When the water comes in, you can see it gushing in, and it kind of creates a wake and bounces pretty much off the seawall. And I have a boat ramp, so that doesn't help. It goes up the boat ramp and over the seawall. Now they want to put a drain in my yard, which would be exactly across from the existing drain. To me, that doesn't make sense. I mean, two drains that go into a very narrow canal right across from each other. I don't think that helps. And the drain line is supposed to be installed all the way from Estero Boulevard, past Slaughter Street, past Falkirk, all the way to my property where it goes into the canal. I'm talking for myself, but I don't think that is a good solution. I'm not a professional drain installer or anything, but it seems to be a better idea to drain the water further down into the back bay. I know it levels out, but at least it doesn't hit a seawall or any kind of other obstruction and bounces back. It kind of like seeps more into it. That's my suggestion. But I realize something has to be done on that street. Yes, I was flooded in this last hurricane, but that had nothing to do with rain or, whatever. I don't know. Any questions? Maybe I'm not very good at talking about it, but that's my story.
Thank you, Roseanne.
Thank you.
Maybe after the meeting, get with Frankie over here in the white shirt. He can answer all your questions. All right.
That's all I have signed up.
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak in public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Next, local achievements and recognitions. Councilor King?
I guess I'll just start with recognizing and appreciating the town manager and all his staff for the hard work in preparing for Tropical Storm Debbie. Also the hard work in the recovery efforts as well with Jeff, his public works folks, and everyone that was involved. It's deeply appreciated. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Earl?
Yeah, it's been a while since we've met, and I've been remiss in not recognizing Councilwoman Woodson and our Lee County Commissioners for the good work they've done on the pier. Alan Shinoski and his wife Cindy, Let's Go FMB, and particularly those who served on the pier committee for Let's Go FMB and that whole organization that really helped get the focus on the pier. And to Councilor Woodson, I'm not sure how you pulled that rabbit out of your hat because things were looking grim for a while, but it was quite a turnaround, and it's a big piece of the puzzle, or a piece of the puzzle in town, for our town. So I just thank you for that, and all those involved. And it kind of got me thinking, this is one of our key puzzle pieces. A number of the other puzzle pieces are falling in place, and I just want to make a couple observations. We have significant activity on the north and the south bridge of this island. We've got new street lighting going on and being installed across the island. We've got massive beach renourishment going on right now across the beach, hopefully to be concluded by the end of the year. We've got a town hall building with additional parking that will be open in a few months at a third of the cost of building a new building. We've got an LPA and council docket over the next few months that is full of redevelopment options for the town. We've got new and rebuilt housing going up all across the island. Our beach school is opening for its first full school year here on the island after the storm. Santini Plaza is making more progress than meets the eye with a number of significant announcements to come. I would just say to those who are listening, Fort Myers Beach is on the move. And I'd like to recognize the residents and the businesses who help make this happen, as well as our governmental partners at the local level, many of whom are sitting in this room, our county partners, our state partners, and our federal partners. I would just say, be encouraged, onward. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Very thorough. Councilor Woodson?
I can't say anything in addition to all of that. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilor Sanford?
Yeah, that's a tough act to follow, Vice Mayor. I want to echo what Councilor King had said. Both Karen and I were out of town, but it never felt like we were out of town. It was not that urgency to come back. The communication between staff and us before the storm was tremendous. You compare this to 2 years ago, and it's night and day. And once again, Nicole, thank you. You did an excellent job getting press releases out and letting the public know what's going on. And Jeff, great job cleaning up. I mean, and we had a plan, and you could see that we had a well-organized plan and was well executed. So thank you once again.
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I agree with both Counselor Safford and Counselor King. They unfortunately, we're getting good at this, which is not something you want to say, but it just goes to show you that the staff is well prepared. And speaking with a lot of people after Debbie, there was a lot of compliments about how well organized, how well people were communicated with. They didn't feel pressure after the storm. They didn't feel like, where are we going to go? What's going to happen? So that's good. I think that brings up morale for people, knowing that if we do have an event like we had with Debbie, that we've got it covered. We've got good communications and relations with our state and local partners. So we've got it as best under control as we can, and still got some work to do, but getting better every day. So thank you. All right, Steve, you want to start us off? I don't see the other presenters here yet, so come on up.
Good morning, Council, Mayor, Vice Mayor, staff. My name is Steve Johnson, Chair of the Marine and Environmental Resource Task Force. Got some administration here to do. It dates back to April, some recommendations and some corrections. So back in April, there was a recommendation to prevent, or at least encouragement from MRF to the Town Council to discourage variances in the EC zone. Actually, the vote had been 5-2, but I wanted to correct the record. It should have been 5-1 as a member did not recuse himself while acting as an HOA president and actively pursuing a variance in the EC zone. So that's really the correction. Number one there where it says EC zone protection was in fact the recommendation that day. But also as a point of clarification, Councilwoman Woodson, I'm sorry, Karen, had asked actually when we made that recommendation whether or not that applied to grandfathered structures. And I had actually mistakenly said it didn't. So I came back at a meeting. We had skipped the meeting, and so we had reconciled that we do in fact recommend to discourage grandfathered structures for that very reason that they're grandfathered, that the forefathers created the EC zone to create that buffer for resilience, for storm events, and to prevent encroachment to the beach. So the fact that it is grandfathered, everybody realized at the time they were grandfathered. And certainly if there was destruction, the idea was that they would not build back in that zone. So next recommendation actually was a correction as well. During that same recommendation time in April, I had failed to also include a recommendation to consider allowing beachfront seawalls as needed to protect the beach from the effects of ebb tide scouring. The vote was 7-0 at the time, and we all know that coastal seawalls and hard structures cause erosion to our beach. But our Dr. Savarese from FGCU, who is a coastal resilience, one of the coastal resilience experts at our forum, had discussed that the seawalls actually do have a positive effect in ebb tide scouring. So after the water inundates up onto the land, on the way back, it prevents the deep scours that affect structural integrity in some of our buildings. So that the recommendation was for council to look into it. All right.
I think that gentleman also said that it was his calculation, correct me if I'm wrong, that the water going back out into the Gulf did more damage than it did coming in. Is that your recollection?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. The structures obstructed and funneled the water, and it scoured and caused, really, it's the structural damage to a lot of the buildings, undermines the base of the building. So the second to last here, so these are new anyway, but there was a recommendation to prioritize mangrove habitat propagation. So planting mangroves throughout the island as a community benefit in all development on Fort Myers Beach. So specifically, as you consider trade-offs with CPDs, RPDs, development orders, instead of maybe a walkover, we have somebody donating some mangroves to a particular lot, or actually adding them to their own property to hold this sand on this barrier island we have. And then last but not least, there was a request for permission to approach the beach school to begin discussions on potential curriculum and ongoing education programs. So that's specifically just a request to town council for permission for MERF members to discuss things with the beach school.
Does anyone have any objection to that?
No.
What kind of curriculum are we talking about?
It would be a a conservation type curriculum. So it would be, I mean, the early discussions, we didn't get too deep into it because we thought we needed to discuss, but basically hands-on things on the beach, around the island. We would provide materials and so I don't want to say sea school type activities, but those types of activities.
It's my understanding that the curriculum that is already underway in terms of being shaped. So I think they've already started that process.
The timing is exactly, and that's why we came for the permission.
I have no
Yeah.
objection.
Okay, perfect. So I'll put a yes there. Any other questions or issues I can address while here?
One of the things that I've been, talking about, and I know that people are probably tired of hearing me talk about it, but it goes kind of along with what you're talking about here.
Mhm.
Is we really got to start to be proactive at trying to find ways to protect the island. And you're
Yeah.
talking about the seawalls, and people have heard me talk about the coastal protection system at nauseam probably, but
Mhm.
if it's okay with my fellow counselors to have Murph start looking into exactly what Clearwater did or what Clearwater has.
Mhm.
Is it something that could be viable? Is it something that we could use mitigation funding for? Is it something that we could put in that could solve more than just one issue when it comes to erosion? It could then prevent some of the traffic issues that we're dealing with as far as getting pedestrians from the north end to the south and bicyclists off the Sarah Boulevard and onto the, onto the Santa Ana Boulevard. And I know they have kind of like a boardwalk type system that goes on top of the coastal protection system.
Mhm.
So does it solve multiple purposes and costs associated with it, and how we can work with our state government and federal government to potentially get, because keep redoing emergency berms over and over and over again seems to be like you're throwing money into a bucket that
Mhm.
has no bottom.
Mhm.
And I think if we start looking at the systems like that, whether it's the seawalls, but to have a continuous
Mhm.
system all the way down versus this guy has it, this guy doesn't, this guy has it, this guy doesn't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure. Oh, sure.
If everybody's okay with it, I think that would be something that falls right in Murph's wheelhouse
Right.
to
Right.
look into and dig up.
Okay. Well, I do know that adult.
Go ahead, please, Mayor.
I'm
I was
sorry.
just going to add, I think, Mr. Mayor, I was talking to the chair of the Public Safety Committee the other day, and I think there's also, and not that both can't look at this, because I think they're both impacted, both committees, and I was talking to Frankie about this. Frankie's over there.
These
I think the term is these Moby
Moby mats. yeah.
mats.
Moby
If
mats.
we had some contiguous Moby mats from Red Coconut down to Times Square, away from the beach, but closer to the buildings, then
Mhm.
bikes could, instead of going on the beach, they could potentially go on these Moby mats. Again, getting people out of their cars and getting another, aside from the potential corridors on the bay side, maybe some options on the Gulf side as well. But there's environmental consequences to that. But at the same time, there's good public safety. I mean, it would be a good discussion to have, I think.
Okay.
Well, I think it goes, I mean, and the more you dig into it, the more you'll find it helps with rebuilding. It helps with taking things out of a velocity zone and putting them in areas where things can be built back at grade level. So I think there's a lot of potential benefits into it, but what does it cost? Is it something that is both environmentally friendly as well as practical?
Mhm.
I think this is kind of right in Murph's wheelhouse to dig in and do the research on that.
So really, you're talking about a seawall.
Essentially, yeah, we'll call it what you want, seawall
Mhm.
coastal protection system. But if you start with Clearwater and see what they have,
Mhm.
it'll kind of give you an idea. It works as a boardwalk. It works as protection from storm and scouring.
Mhm.
So it's multifaceted, and it's something that doesn't have any of, it doesn't really affect the property owners. It doesn't really affect people because it's something that you can still see over. It's not, it's not
Sure.
gonna hinder your
Sure.
view.
I mean, it's not like the initial recommendation from Margaritaville, right?
It's
Where they had that-
exactly it.
I
Exactly
understand
it.
what you're asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. it.
So,
Which would have been huge if we had it in place.
so taking it one step further, it seems like the most floodings in the downtown district, so, Crescent Street and all that are there public funds available to raise seawalls on the back around the canals?
And again, I think that's where Murph would come in good in doing the research and finding all that information out. And then obviously
Sure.
bringing it to,
Or maybe some pumps that if we do get water, we can pump out the water quicker or.
yeah, that was one of the things I was going to bring up is if there's something like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm on the
You
same
were
page.
stranded.
Yeah. 'Cause-
Yeah, I was stranded.
Well, it seems like that's always, the deepest part and the quickest one to flood. And
A lot of the
I think-
neighborhoods are too, though, Scott. I mean,
I'm
it's
sorry?
not, it's a lot of the neighborhoods are
Oh,
as
sure.
well.
Yeah,
I mean,
believe me,
yeah,
I
I mean,
know
we've got-
there are a couple.
We've
couple
established,
streets.
yeah, really a watershed that's dumping
Right.
into the canals. And
I mean,
it's-
is there portable solutions to be able to put out there quickly after a storm when the water does go down below the outfalls to help try to expedite the water getting off the streets and not just relying on the storm drains to be able to
Mhm.
get it off the island. So I think that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So if you want to add that to your list of things to research, and obviously it's got to be practical and economical, and but if we could pull something out there with a simple pump truck or
There's-
something.
Yep, there's grants available and or
All kinds of stuff.
insurance rates. I think it'd be a win-win long term.
Mhm. Okay, I think I got all my notes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
All right, thank you for your
Thanks.
time.
I don't see the other presenter here, so we're just gonna continue on.
We haven't
Next.
heard from him.
You haven't heard from them? Maybe they'll show up for the M&P part of it. Yeah. Next is the approval of the minutes from the town council meeting on June 17th, 2024. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from June 17th?
So moved.
Motion by Counselor King,
I'll second.
seconded by Counselor Woodson. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Next is the consent agenda. There are 3 items on it, I think it's the first time ever we've had 3 state of emergencies at the same time, but is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
A motion by Counselor Woodson. Second by Counselor Safford. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Next is public hearings. First is ordinance 24-18 DCI 202-40143 for 1668 I Street, the Beach Bar. A continuance has been requested by the petitioner, but I've been told we have to open it.
Yes.
And then, so
Read the title.
this is an ordinance of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, approving with conditions, denying a request to rezone the property located at 1668 I Street, generally identified as strap number 19-46-24-W4-0070B.0110, Fort Myers Beach, from downtown to commercial plan development, CPD zoning, with deviations for a bar and residence, providing for other clarifications as necessary, providing for conflicts of law, Scrivener's errors, severability, and providing for an effective date. Who started that? So they want to do a continuance, right? Jason?
Morning, Jason Smalley with your Planning and Zoning Department. Yes, they, through their contractor, they have asked for an extension until the 19th of August.
19th of August. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the continuance to a date certain of August 19th?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, got a motion by Counselor Safford, seconded by Counselor King. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Next is a review of SEZ 202-30126-163 Old San Carlos, an annual review of an approved resolution 23-87 for special exception SEZ 202-30126 that allows temporary outdoor consumption on premises with retail use at 163 Old San Carlos Boulevard.
Good morning. Again, my name is Jason Smalley with your Planning and Zoning Department. As you have just mentioned, this is a requested 12-month re-review for the property on 163 Old San Carlos Boulevard. This was contained within the approved resolution 23-87. The resolution put in some conditions of approval and also requested that after 12 months, the applicant come back to show what movement has been made. Staff, as of this morning, has looked at both of the lots that the applicant owns, both 185 and 163. We can report that in the past year, there have been no new code issues or violations for either of those lots. And as of this morning, no permits for site or development work have been pulled on either of those lots.
Okay. Any questions for Jason? All right, thanks, Jason. Applicant, you want to, we can have them come up, right? Yeah.
Sure.
You want to come up and say anything? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
I'm Susie Bayhan. I own both of those properties. The reason that there have been no applications submitted is because the flood insurance on 163 Old San Carlos Boulevard is still in litigation. I never thought it would still be in litigation a year later, but it is. Therefore, I am selling property, my home in Texas, in order to take those funds and to remodel the 185 Old San Carlos, which is the bar building. So that's where we're at. And when it sells, then I will commence repair and remodel of that building.
Have you had a meeting with Joe or Frankie about some of the issues that staff had with potential safety hazards? Has that meeting happened?
I spoke to Frankie. Yes,
Okay.
I did.
All right.
And we're working on that.
Okay, so you're comfortable. Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Suzie, good morning.
Good morning.
This is an opportunity. A lot of folks are watching. Do you want to kind of give a little plug as to how your business is doing, what your hours are, and just encourage people to come on down since you've got the
Sure.
floor?
We're open Friday and Saturday nights right now, just because it's off season, and that seems to be when everybody's frequenting the beach.
Start from the beginning. Tell them where it is and what you guys do.
Sure. It's 163 Old San Carlos Boulevard. It's called Susie Q's. It's an outdoor tiki bar. We have live music every Friday and Saturday night. We have a DJ, takes requests. It's a good time, but we're open typically between 7:30 until everybody's done. So that's right now. When season starts, our hours will be extended.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions?
I have a question, because I live right down that canal
Mhm.
and there are noise ordinances in place.
Right.
And there's a lot of times the music is way past the time.
Okay.
So it's not just me, it's neighbors in that whole street that have come to me and said, what about the noise ordinances? They're not being followed. So that is one thing that I would expect as we move forward with this, that would be in compliance.
Okay. Well, typically, I believe it's 11 o'clock that the noise ordinance is in effect. We typically lower the volume at 11, but we can adjust that.
It's not lowered.
Is it 11 or 10? I thought
I
it was
think it's
10.
10.
Is it 10?
It's 10. Yeah, it's 10 o'clock. It's not 11.
Okay.
So that is something that I would want assurance that stays in compliance.
Okay.
Because what happens is it's like a big pond there.
Mhm.
It's like a lake, because you're at the basin
Mhm.
and it just goes.
Okay.
So, and there truly are many times I can hear it with all my doors closed and the air conditioner on. So
Oh.
it's hyper.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Is there a motion to approve or deny special exception SEZ 202-30126?
I believe this is just a review of one that you've already
don't
done.
need to
So
vote on
no, you've
there's not-
accepted the testimony and there's no reason to revisit it.
So we don't have to vote to extend it. It just automatically gets extended.
I believe so,
For
yes.
how long? For
I believe it's
year?
another 12 months. It says annual, so
Oh,
I'm
you're
assuming.
right. I'm sorry. This shall come back for review every 12 months. Okay, so a motion to extend it for another 12 months.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the extension or deny the extension for 12 months?
I'll move to extend.
Okay, got a motion by Vice Mayor Adderholt. I will second. Any further discussion?
Do we have to do 12 months or can we do 6 months? Because there's things in the works. I think that property, especially on Old San Carlos, is very visual to so many people and nothing has been done. And I understand, insurance, everything else, it's a nightmare. But I would like to see it shortened up to 6 months and have some movement.
Mayor, if I may,
sir.
also, I'm not sure if she's aware, but the property next to her at some point is going to be demoed by the town. So you're going to have a wall issue there. So just to keep her in the loop of that.
I certainly am not opposed to changing it to 6 months versus 12 months.
You can do that.
Okay.
I'll restate my motion and move to extend for 6 months.
I'll amend my second.
Did you want to see if there's any comment from the applicant?
Sure. Would the applicant like to comment on?
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. We're
Okay,
good.
understood. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Next is ordinance 24-17, advisory committees. This is the first reading and public hearing of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, amending section 2-94, qualifications and appointments of members, and section 2-96, removal of agency, board, committee, or commission members of Division 2, procedures for the establishment of boards, committees, and commissions of Article 4, boards, commissions, committees, and other agencies of Chapter 2, administration, and section 34-113, composition, appointment, and compensation of members of Division 3, local planning agency of Article 2, zoning procedures of Chapter 34, zoning districts, design standards, and nonconformities of the Code of Ordinances of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, removing property ownership as a qualification requirement for the members of the town's agencies, boards, committees, or commissions, including the town's local planning agency, eliminating duplicative language, adding a grandfather provision for current non-qualifying members of the town's boards, agencies, commissions, and committees, adding a provision to section 34-113 regarding the mandatory annual financial disclosure form as required by Florida Commission on Ethics, providing for codification, severability, scrivener's errors, conflicts of law, and an effective date. Will now open the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an ordinance that has been before you before. Before our summer break, it came to you on first reading on June the 17th. And at that time, there were some suggestions made to revise a couple other sections. And because of that, we felt it would be appropriate to come back as a first reading. So this is on first reading to you. The substantive changes that have been made is to eliminate the requirement of property ownership within the town's boundary. And the reason for that was that became a fact-based criteria that was a little bit difficult to determine whether or not they owned property on the island, if they resided there. So the criteria has been changed to simply say that they must be a registered voter within the territorial boundaries of the town of Fort Myers Beach. And that determination as to whether they are a registered voter is made by the supervisor of elections. So it's a very black and white, easy analysis and review to try to clear up that ambiguity. There was some duplicative language in section 2-94 and 2-96 that talked about the removal of members regarding offenses involving moral turpitude. That's been eliminated. And there was also an addition that the planning board, we just added the language that under Florida law, they are required to file their financial disclosure.
Okay.
Those are the proposed changes.
Scott, any questions for Nancy?
Yes. I had asked that Exhibit A be changed for town council. It still says the requirements Form 6 as of right now. That's not the case.
Mhm.
So can we change that to whatever
State law requires.
state law
Mhm.
requires, please?
Sure.
That's all I have.
Okay.
We will do that and bring it, you'll see that change at second reading.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we're good.
No, I'm fine.
Vice Mayor?
I'm just curious, Nancy, the LPA and the audit committee are the only two advisory committees that are sort of designated by state statute. Does state statute have any language that affects these
No,
changes?
we did not find any residency requirements in state statute, but you are imposing some at the local level.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor King?
That just answered my question. Thank you.
I do not have any.
Also, on second reading, we'll be bringing back your procedural rules. So we need to make a little tweak there in order to have it consistent with this proposed ordinance.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion to
Do we need
move this to the second?
public comment?
Oh, do we need public comment? Yeah, I'm sorry. Public comment? Thank you. Anyone here would like to speak in public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Do we want, does this need to be roll call or, okay. Is there a motion to move this to the second reading on August 19th, 2024 at 9 a.m.?
So moved.
Got a motion by Counselor King,
Second,
seconded by Counselor Woodson. Any further discussion? John?
Aye.
Counselor Woodson?
aye.
Counselor Safford?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Adderhold?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the administrative agenda. The first one up is the fiscal year 2023 audit report. Joe? Would you feel more comfortable if you were able to sit down during this, or you're going to be okay up
No,
to
I should be
the?
okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So this very first item, let's see. Oh, I do have the presentation up. That's great. It's just a couple of slides to just go through regarding these resolutions that I'm responsible for. For this first one is regarding the acceptance of the FY23 audit report. The audit was performed by our auditors, Malden and Jenkins, and they have issued an unmodified report. So in other words, it's a clean opinion, which is the highest form of assurance that can be rendered regarding our financial statements, that we present fairly the financial position of the town. And there was also no findings by their test of the town's internal controls and compliance with laws and regulations. So I just personally just like to comment on that in the sense that given the volume of all of the emergency transactions that had to be thoroughly documented and accounted for, the compressed period of time that we had to do that within, and then the relatively small size of our finance department, I think that this was an extraordinary accomplishment for us. So I'm very proud of our finance department staff for their hard work and their dedication to excellence. But then it goes beyond the finance department. It's also a reflection of the town's administrative staff for their adherence to strict internal controls. And so the credit also needs to be shared with them. And I'm grateful to our town manager for supporting us in providing the additional resource that we needed in order to handle that volume. So Malden and Jenkins presented the audit report results to the audit committee at their July 29th meeting, and they have recommended that the town council accepts the audit report.
Questions for Joe? Counselor King?
No questions, but I'll just reiterate what you already suggested. And you're obviously a part of that as well, as for everyone's hard work and good and excellent work on this. So thank you, everyone.
Vice Mayor Adderhold?
Great report, Joe. Congratulations to you and your team. I'm curious what the status is of the contract with Maudlin and Jenkins. Is it a multi-year contract? Is it up for renewal? Where are we at with the contract?
From what I understand, it's a 3-year contract. So they've completed 2 of the 3 years. The next audit, to audit our current year, 2024, that would also fall within like the 3rd year of their contract. And this was also discussed at the audit committee meeting. And we were prepared even to go as far as approving an RFP if the audit committee felt that that was necessary, but they did not feel that that was necessary. They are recommending that we extend the contract 1 more year or renew it for this 3rd year and have them do the audit for 2024 as well.
And then after that additional year,
Yes.
it would go out for bid again?
It would.
And you inherited this firm.
Yeah.
This is an incumbent firm. What was your impression of the firm and their work? Obviously, they blessed your efforts,
Yes.
but nonetheless, what was your impression of the firm, and are you comfortable with this firm?
I am comfortable with them. I was impressed with their flexibility because it was a struggle for us to pull everything together. And so they were very patient and flexible and accommodating of like any delays that we had and providing them with the information. So, and then they also were helpful. And if we had questions or issues that we needed some guidance in how to deal with, they were right there and responded instantly to our request for guidance. And they were very thorough. They required a lot of information from us to review. So, and which is part of why it took as long as it did. So I was very impressed with how thorough they were.
Was it the same players for the firm that did the review that had done it previously or previous to your employee with the
I
town of
think
Fort Myers
it's,
Beach?
well, I don't know for certain, but I'm under the impression it's probably the same audit manager. But I believe the staff has been changing because it even had changed, from year to year since I've been here.
I ask that because obviously, as you know, there were concerns before you all got here that there might be a need for a forensic audit of sorts. Do you feel as if the work that this firm did, even though they're their incumbent firm, gave you assurances that that forensic audit is not necessary?
Yes, I mean they have to me, and I certainly have not seen any evidence of a need for that personally. But I realize, as a staff member, that should not be my opinion alone. And I know that they did not see any evidence of anything. And I think if there was concerns of any kind of mishandling of things, it was not within the finances of the town. It would have been maybe things that were happening, outside of the town, maybe in personal dealings with people, but it was not with the town's financial resources.
Very good. I just want to thank you for your good work. Thanks to the audit committee as well we've got a lot of new members of the audit committee and they seem like they're doing good work. So thank you for their efforts and your team as well. That's all I've got, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Council Woodson?
I just want to express kudos, everything about this team. When you came in here, our finances, I know, were questionable, skeptical. You pulled from every direction to try to get into the right format, into the compliance the way we needed to be. And your work has just been phenomenal. And so I want to thank you and your team. You've created a great team. The work that you do with Andy, I mean, it's great. Going into this budget period, we are set. I mean, we know already everything that's happening. I don't think that was something that ever happened in previous councils. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, another thing you have to realize how this was so Herculean is that fiscal year 23 started 3 days after the hurricane hit.
Okay.
So to get a clean opinion in and of itself is incredible, but to get a clean opinion after the storm we had 2 days later is incredible. Kudos to you, Joe. And kudos to you, Andy. Everyone.
Yeah, I think it's an extraordinary feat that you guys pulled off, and it just goes to show you that when people work together as a team, you can get things done. And it starts at the top with providing resources that you need to get the job done, and knowing that you're committed to excellence is what we're striving for. So thank you to you and your team.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, thank you to Joe and his team. Great to work with, and we had a feeling out period with everything at getting here, all the newness that you see in the room. But you guys too, the leadership that you provided and the direction you helped me with, that reflects on this as well. So it's a big deal for you. The other thing, Vice Mayor, we have discussed, Joe and I, an RFP for a new audit firm. I'm a firm believer about 3 years is a good time to change. It keeps everybody on their toes and it gives you a clear break. But we have to start now in the RFP to get it ready for next October 1st. So it's a process. So you get them lined up well before you get into the next year. So Joe and I will be working with that with the audit committee and Councilor Safford as well.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mayor, I'll move, we accept the fiscal year 2023 audit report.
All right, I'll second. Motion by Councilor King, second by Mayor Allers. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Next is the second amendment of the right-of-way agreement with Bands Construction Company. Authorize the mayor to execute amendment number 2 to the previous non-exclusive right-of-way agreement with Bands Construction Company, Inc. to extend the agreement for 2 additional months under the same terms and conditions. Andy or Frankie?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is Surf Style Shop right in the corner of Old San Carlos and Estero. When they got in and started doing the reno on that project, they didn't realize that the pit for the elevator had to be redone. They thought they could salvage the old elevator that was there. It has to be a new sized elevator by code. So that kind of put them back and getting structural steel to the island as well as an elevator service. So that's what they're requesting.
Okay. And they're going to keep, I noticed they're keeping the sidewalk open.
We have worked with them and to get the sidewalk open as fast as possible during the day when they have deliveries and they're doing outside construction or moving iron beams in. Of course, they've been very good to work with that way. But as soon as that work is done for the day, they do try to move it in as quick as possible.
Okay. Any questions for Frankie? Councilor King?
None.
Vice Mayor Harold? Nothing. Wilson?
Nope.
Councilor Safford?
None.
I don't have any either. Is there a motion to approve the Second Amendment?
So move.
Got a motion by Councilor King,
Second.
seconded by Councilor Woodson. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Next is Resolution 24-135 CDBG-DR Excessive Force Policy. A resolution of the Town Council of Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, adopting policy protecting individuals engaged in nonviolent civil rights demonstrations and providing for an effective date. Frankie? Or Andy?
Actually,
or-
this is good. Jason's going to actually
Jason?
speak to this.
Oh,
Jason
okay.
kind of organizes and orchestrates our FROC program.
Perfect.
I want him to talk a little bit about our score and where we are in the first year, how amazing it is.
Sure. So, good morning, Jason Freeman for the record. So
Hold
this,
on a second.
this
You
one's
mentioned
CDBGDR,
FROC, That's the
right?
next one. This is CDBGR.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But yeah, I mean, we could, so this one is just part
They're
of,
tied together.
the town submitted some applications for the planning, or I'm sorry, this one's for public facilities and critical infrastructure for the CDBGDR program. As part of that application process, the county requested that we submit an excessive force policy, even though we don't have our own law enforcement. So this policy just mirrors what the county has already established. And then we can submit that resolution as part of our full application package. So it was on as part of the application materials for those CDBGDR grants.
So can you explain what the excessive force policy is? I mean, just an overview of it or not?
Yes, I can step in. So if you have, again, this is a HUD-driven program. So the
Right.
CDBGR is driven by
The feds.
housing and urban development.
Right.
So within that context, if we have a public facility or we're using federal funds for a public facility, we cannot discriminate or exclude people from peaceful protests in front of those buildings. We cannot show that we're coming in with a water cannon to get them moved out of the way. In our case, the Back Bay flooding to push them away. But it's one of those things where you have to be cognizant of all the things around you and be that. To Jason's point, we do not have our own police force, but we do know that the county follows these policies with the LCSO, and they have also drafted this language into their CDBGR document, and so we did likewise.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and this resolution just mirrors the county's policy. So it's just one of those things that even though we don't have our own, we're still going to be a good partner and
Kind
with
of
that
a
as well.
check the box.
Correct.
Yep.
Just for
Got
HUD. Yeah,
Exactly.
Got it.
Housekeeping.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
thank you.
Councilor Safford, questions?
Nope.
Vice Mayor Harold?
No.
Councilor King?
Just got a comment. I mean, it just, it seems silly. It seems like a waste of time, but we have to jump through these
We
hoops. I
agree.
mean, you have federal protections under the Constitution, obviously from the state and the county. I thought about turning my back during this presentation in some of the municipalities that would have got me arrested and $1 million payout, but we'll go through with it. Thank you.
Right. Is there a motion, any further discussion? Is there a motion to approve Resolution 24-135 CDBG-DR Excessive Force Policy?
So moved.
Got a
Second.
motion by Councilor Woodson, second by Councilor Safford. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Mayor,
Aye.
Mayor, roll call.
Oh, so that's a roll call? Okay, Councilor Woodson,
Aye.
Councilor Safford?
Aye.
Councilor King?
I'll go with that.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Motion carries unanimously. Next is Resolution 24-136, 2025 FROC participation. This is a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, authorizing the town manager to execute the 2025 participation request and renewal form for the Florida Recovery Obligation Calculation FROC program, authorizing the town manager or their designee to execute and submit related documents needed to implement and administer the program, including the disaster readiness assessment, and the abatement activities, providing an effective date. Jason? Or-
Uh,
Go ahead.
Good morning again, Council. Jason Freeman for the record. So yeah, FROC, we're going into our second year now, so it's a pretty exciting time. A couple staff members attended a training last week that was put on by FDEM, just going over what's new for the program for this year, and kind of different ways that we can incorporate different forms and policies that they're starting to do. We did finally get our scores for last year. So after we submitted all of our policies and procedures and procurement documents, we originally had scores of out of 60, we had a 37 and a 38. Through everybody's efforts with Andy and the executive team and then all the staff as well. We did get our score for category A from a 37 to a 54 out of 60. And category B, we got from a 38 to a 55. So we're almost there, but we had a pretty large improvement, which is exciting. And that score automatically translates to more upfront funding for obligated projects if and when we would need to do that. So it's really exciting. We still have a little way to go though with it. So next year, if you all choose to opt in again, which I think we're really excited for, then we can hopefully tackle those couple final points and keep going from there. So it's been an ongoing effort for sure. We're learning all the different ways to kind of get more prepared, ways to improve our policies and procedures, working with everybody. So yeah, it's a very exciting time, but we just hope to kind of keep going up from there. So
Jason, do they have like tiers, like your point system, and does that relate to percentages of what you can get?
it does. So there's a couple different ways you get to, they're changing the score actually this year compared to what it was last year. But last year, just for opting in, you got 20 points for a baseline. And then there was 40 points you could earn from this disaster readiness assessment, which is where we went through all of our policies and procedures and submitted all those to FDEM for review. That's when we got those initial scores. Then they came back and gave some suggestions through an abatement plan of different ways that we can improve, and incorporate this policy, make sure you're following FEMA language if you're using federal funds, making sure that you have an emergency financial plan set up. And so through that, we increased those scores. So right now, we're about 55 and 54 to 60, and that translates directly to a percentage for that upfront funding. So there's 20 extra points that you can get, but you can only get it after a disaster is declared. And they get those points through what they're called a post-disaster questionnaire. So they're going to go back after an event and say, did you use these forms? Did you follow your procedures? Did you do all this? And that gives you that extra 20 points. So it's up to 80 points, but we can't get those 20 until there's an actual disaster declared, and then we submit that information after. So I believe it can be up to that percentage, from what we understand, translates directly to it. So that 55 right now gives us 55% upfront. And then we get that opportunity for the 20% more. So you can get up to 80% from what we understand of funding directly after obligation, which I think is huge compared to a lot of those emergency expedited projects. I think you get up to around 50%. So that's already given us a huge chunk more of money. We hope we don't have to use it, but just in case we do, it saves a lot of money, I think, out of pocket for us. So,
And you think
helps
the
those
changes and the
reserves.
things that we're doing now are going to potentially, hopefully give us an increase to that 60 or close?
Yeah,
to it?
absolutely. And that's what the training was last week, was just kind of going over different ways that we can still improve. Just because it's the second year that they're doing it, I don't believe many municipalities have been able to do a post-disaster questionnaire because we haven't had any events. I think this might be the first one with Debbie, depending on what we need to submit for it. But we can kind of learn from that. Once we kind of go through that first post-disaster questionnaire, we can see where we improve. And then kind of see where we're at with everything. That was one of the big things that we were asking is they kind of break down different categories, but they don't, and through your questions that you answer. And we're trying to figure out, which areas we still lack and not getting those full points. And then we'll work on improving those. But yeah, I think overall it's going to be a really great program to kind of just really, it's more of an internal audit for us, which was great, of different procedures and everything that the state recommends that we do. So we've kind of adopted all those suggestions with it, and we'll continue to do so. And it's an evolving program too. So I think this next year we'll learn a lot more once they actually get that in use with expedited funding and people doing those post-disaster questionnaires too. So it's really exciting.
Jason, if we could just take it up 1,000 feet.
Sure.
Because you went granular pretty quick. So for folks who are watching, this in essence is a quality control program by the state of Florida, that
Correct.
if we participate and we participate successfully, it makes it easier for us to get public assistance from the state after disaster. Is that a fair characterization?
It is, yeah. It's so the Division of Emergency Management, they went through and have started making all these different templates that they encourage municipalities and agencies to use anything from timesheets to inventory logs to asset management trackers. And those are all already vetted through FDEM. So it kind of saves a lot of time, not only for us, and we're giving them exactly the information that they need, but then it's already kind of pre-cleared. So they can help provide that to FEMA if they need to. So it's just really strengthening, I think, that partnership of using everything and giving FDEM everything that they would need through their forms. So it's
Did the town of Fort Myers Beach participate in this program prior to Hurricane Ian?
so it just started last year. So we opted in the first year, which is exciting. So we were part of that first group, and then now I think there's going to be a lot more participation in the second round. So that was one of the big things we were going through in the training. It's just that not a lot of agencies have been able to utilize the full program yet, just because it's so new. But
So we would be one of the first communities in the state to qualify and
we were in that
participate
first round. Yep, that first year. So, and then
That's
now,
amazing.
yeah, and then so moving on. So, and I'm curious to see. Hopefully, we can kind of see where we were with our scores compared to everybody else too. But we don't have that information yet.
Jason, we were also used as an example in their training. That they
We were, yes. Our debris cleanup project that we worked with Lee County and the state for was their model for the training statewide. So.
See, now, Jason, this is good stuff. You got to lead with this stuff.
Yeah. So it's
Give
it is
yourself some credit
exciting.
here.
It's kind of it's keeping us definitely on the map there. So yeah, FROC, the Division of Emergency Management's going around doing a training tour. So a couple of us went to it last week in Lee County. And yeah, they're sharing the message. So it's exciting.
Very good. Thank you.
So yeah, it's pretty exciting. We'll see where the program goes this year, but definitely appreciate if y'all can let us opt in for this year.
Don't run off yet. Counselor King, question?
Is there anything you need from us as a council? I know people have to report certain things.
Sure.
When I came on board after the hurricane, there were certain things that we had to submit for the state.
Sure.
I don't know if there's anything at this point that we need to do or.
I think the biggest thing is just making sure that we're having all the right documentation. And I think, between the administrative department and finance, we're all have a much stronger handle on it, just making sure we're collecting all these forms. The FDEM has made new time tracking forms that we're going to utilize this year.
And that's kind of what I was referring to.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just making sure that we have all the proper documentation for everything just moving forward, whether it's, financial related emergency purchases. The program goes through all of our procurement policies and how we get emergency contracts and just make sure that we're following everything. So really it's just making sure that it's a lot easier, not only for us for submitting PA projects and getting reimbursement for everything. FDEM makes it easier for them and for FEMA too. So I think it just streamlines that whole process, which is
Is there
pretty
anything
exciting.
though, as a council for us individually that you need reporting such as time that we've spent doing something or?
Anything that we think could qualify for emergency measures and protections, then yes, and we can work with y'all on that. That if you do anything disaster related, whether it's pre or post storm, we'll make sure that we're working on maybe doing a training with everybody just to fill out those forms. So we encourage all town staff, and that way we standardize that and streamline that process for getting that through. So I think we're in a much better spot, and this kind of just help give us some suggestions on different policies that we can use. So it's exciting.
The only other thing would be a couple of silly comments that I usually offer. One is the old radio DJ in me wants to go with Stereo 98 F-Rock on your dial. And the other is old enough to watch the Flintstones. It's F-Rock, Twitch.
Oh my God.
There you go, down memory lane.
Counselor Woodson?
I will move to approve.
Okay.
my gosh.
Twitch or?
There's a motion to approve resolution 24-136.
I'll second it.
Motion by Counselor Woodson, seconded by Counselor Safford. Any further discussion? Counselor Woodson?
Aye.
Counselor Safford?
Aye.
Counselor King?
Ah,
Vice Mayor Adderholt? Aye. And I'm an aye. Motion carries
Thank you.
unanimously.
starts to.
Next is resolution 24-147, BCC TD Fund Grant Agreement Fiscal Year 2025. A resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, authorizing the mayor or town manager to execute a grant agreement with the Lee County Board of County Commissioners for receipt of tourist development tax funds in the amount of $1,262,550 from beach and shoreline maintenance, authorizing the mayor or town manager to execute any related documents needed for receipt of the funding and providing an effective date. Who's going to speak on this one?
It's you.
Frankie?
You guys are fine.
So basically what this is doing is just keeping us, all our expenses that were occurring out on the beach, moving forward, and some of the expenses, right, on some of those programs that aren't being picked up, to be submitted properly and be passed. So it's just like a regular routine capture of documents and information that we're doing for some of the projects.
Chad, do you want to come up and maybe explain what those dollars are going to be used for? Is that just so in case people don't know?
Sure. So we have equipment, landscaping.
Identify yourself, please.
Oh, sure. Chad Schutz, environmental staff. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see y'all. So sure, TDC, it's a maintenance fund. Again, it's going to be the equipment that we need, transportation along the beach, the ATVs. We have our landscaping, personnel for operations, keeping the beach clean and inviting for all of our tourists and residents.
A good example for that, in this last go around with TDC, we requested a mini sweeper, similar to what they use in Miami Beach. And it's basically the size of a sidewalk, one person operation, but it would keep our beach accesses clean, our downtown area, as far as Times Square area clean on a daily basis. We were granted that in this last go around. We requested more equipment that ended up in the back bay after Ian, skid steer for the town. They graciously agreed to pay for half of that. We had insurance money to cover the back half of that. So we'll come October 1st, we'll be getting a brand new skid steer to help maintain some of our beach accesses, especially help with re-putting down of the Moby mats after we just got them all done and nice. But those type of things. And then as far as on the security side of it, they granted us 2 positions for 2 full-time beach rangers that will be out there just doing beach activity. So instead of rangers that we currently have that are splitting that time up, we're going to move away from that with the rangers inland and just keep these 2 people with vehicles out on the beach.
If I could,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Frankie, so would this be the first time that the TDC actually, it covers the salary for these 2 employees?
We currently have employees that are, the salaries are covered by TDC.
So this is not a new
This
precedent?
is not a new thing, no.
Just continuing what we've been doing?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
And we haven't, we're still in the workings for this coming year as far as our asks. We've also gotten portable restrooms, I think on Palm Avenue and in Newton through the TDC as well, which the one.
Is that the one that's sitting over here? That
The one on
still
Palm
needs to
Avenue
go
is
up?
installed, and the new one is that you see over here, our DPW lot is going to be going over to Newton Park. Yeah.
Do we have a time frame on when that's going to get installed?
Jeff Hauge, Public Works. As soon as we can get everything coordinated, the restroom trailer actually came in a lot quicker than we were anticipating, which is great. So we just got to coordinate with FP&L and an electrician to get it all hooked up and get all the sewer hooked up.
And that's
So
just so people.
I would say in the next, if we can get everything rolling, less than a month maybe.
Okay, and it'll be similar to the setup that we have at Palm Avenue, hard plumbed.
Yep, hard plumbed, and then we'll have parking there as well, and then a beach access open at Newton.
Okay.
So just to be clear, because I don't want this confused with Palm Avenue, we potentially will have public restrooms open at Newton Park within a month?
If all things
Potentially,
get coordinated correctly, we know how some of those get delayed, but
And those public restrooms are obviously temporary until we get a more permanent design for the park, correct?
yeah, there'll be, we own the trailer, so
Yep.
yeah, it'll be, we'll have to figure out what that's gonna look like as far as a restroom there, but yeah, it'll be semi-permanent for now. I mean, it's gonna be hard plumbed in and air conditioned and all that.
I know those restrooms will be very welcomed by folks along the beach.
We're trying.
Yeah.
Especially down there.
Counselor Woodson or King, do you have any questions for?
I do not.
Okay. Now,
I'm good.
Counselor Stafford?
I'm good.
I'm good as well. Thanks, sir. Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-147 BCC TD Fund Grant Agreement?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor King, seconded by Counselor Woodson. Any further discussion? Counselor King?
Aye.
Counselor Woodson?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ho?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next is resolution 24-148 FDEP Hurricane Restoration Grant. This is a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, authorizing the town manager to execute amendments to Florida Department of Environmental Protection Hurricane Restoration Reimbursement Grant to fund the Estero Island Beach Renourishment and Hurricane Recovery Project and providing an effective date. Chad?
Morning again, Chad Schutz. So this hurricane restoration reimbursement grant, we've already taken advantage of that. That was that $1.9 million grant that we used to build the North Berm on North Estero Island. That project's done. The idea with this one is the state made $35 million available to municipalities and local governments for sand projects, large-scale sand projects, which we are underway. It's on a first-come, first-served basis. So we did not want to hold up any funding that we would be eligible for by having to wait for council to authorize future amendments to this permit. So we, you know, our beach projects are already funded. We have funding from TDC, we have funding from the state, and we have our part. The great thing about this grant is it funds up to 100% of the eligible cost with no local match required. So theoretically, it as long as we get our you know, it's first come, first serve. So as long as we get our invoices and receipts in for what we paid Aetna and Coastal Engineering in timely, we're positioned very well to take advantage and reduce the local cost share for TDC and for the town substantially. Excellent. Also, Michael Poff is here. If y'all wanted an update on our beach project and everything that's going on,
You read my mind.
seem timely. Yes, sir.
Come on up, Mike. Welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you. For the record, Michael Poff. It's good to be able to laugh a little bit in the wake of what we're dealing with. So thank you, Councilor King, for the entertainment there a little earlier. I enjoyed it.
Only of a certain age, though.
I'm older than I look, so I got
think
my.
you're using that word entertainment lightly.
Yeah.
I got my dad's baby face. I'm older than I look, so I've enjoyed the Flintstones and some of your references. Anyway, obviously Debbie caused significant flooding, overwash of the berm, and so we are in the middle of assessing all of the conditions on the beach. We just met with Aetna's construction crew. 2 brave souls stayed on the equipment throughout the weather and kept the pipeline from snapping or breaking as far as we can tell on the land side. It's all been reset in place now on the beach side. And the dredge pulled into safe harbor in Hurricane Bay. It rode out this particular event safely. And so the last item that we need to check is the submerged pipeline. So we had literally been on the beach pumping water, testing the system the day before we had to pull in for, Aetna had to pull in for the storm. And so we were that close to starting pumping sand. But they did fill the pipe with sand to weigh it down, in addition to the anchors to try to keep that pipeline in place. So the next order of business is when the conditions are safe, they will assess the pipeline and check its position, and then bring the dredge back on site and start pumping water through to blow the sand out of the line and make sure that they have their pressures, make sure there are no leaks. And when all of that has been tested, any leaks have been repaired, we will start pumping sand. And so we will also survey, CEC will repeat the survey of the north segment to evaluate the sand volume changes. We know a lot of sand was overwashed, so as much as possible, let's get that sand back on the beach. With that said, we don't want topsoil, we don't want asphalt bits, we don't want those things brought back to the beach. So the property owners who are scraping the sand off their parking lots and things, please coordinate with Chad and with Public Works to make sure that if we can recover that sand, let's put it back onto the beach, or at least put it right at the edge of your seawall or your upland, so that we can evaluate it to make sure that it can go back on the beach and be safe for birds and turtles and recreational use. So we are going to rebuild the berm to what we built it originally. The only positive thing, which I even hate to say it that way, is that the low-lying areas landward of the berm have now been filled in with the berm sand. And so we will build off that platform and put the berm back in place, and then move forward. We have the dune plans ready to go out for bid. And so we will shortly follow with dune plantings. And so the goal is to rebuild what we had from the berm projects. We had the emergency berm from the FEMA, and then we had the second truck haul from the DEM $8 million grant. And so we'll put back as much as we can into place with Otna while they're here on site, take advantage of them. We do have a limited supply of sand in the bar area. We will exhaust that volume. And then whatever we don't have done, we will go back to the DEM grant. We still have 3.3 million roughly in that grant available to then truck haul in sand. And we've also asked for additional funds from DEP for hotspot maintenance in the first 2 years of the project in their annual funding request. There's a resolution that you will be asked to approve for that specific annual grant that we've been doing now for the past 5 years for you. And so I don't know if that's not on today's agenda, is it? Next meeting, you'll have another similar companion item that'll be a resolution for LGFR, the local government funding request funds. And so we are positioned well with the HRRGP funds that Chad just brought before you and you approved to take advantage of that opportunity, which will free up dollars in your current funding for additional sand placement if we need it. So let's pray for calm seas, low water, low winds, and get Otna pumping sand. And that is our best defense against the next storm. So thank you.
Vice Mayor, question?
Mike, first of all, so thankful you're here and all you do for our town. You're one of our best contracted employees, or for lack of a better term, you're a great partner.
You might be bordering honorary citizen.
Well, I did sneak in the back entrance, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just have to put a desk here with us. So
I don't say this about many.
this is our community too, and so we are in Bonita with our office. We have people who live and recreate here, and so it's a privilege and an honor to represent you, not just on the beach project, but the dinghy dock, the mooring field, and the other public works projects. So we are here. We're committed to help
I
you.
don't
Thank
say
you.
this very often, but you exude competence, and we're very thankful for
Thank
your
you.
service.
You're my best marketing, sir. Thank you. I don't have to advertise. I have you all.
Just so I'm clear, though, you kind of went through this pretty quickly. So for the emergency berm, you're going to replenish the emergency berm instead of like we did initially with the truck in stand. You're going to replenish the emergency berm with pumped in sand from the Gulf. Did I understand you correctly on that?
We will do as much as we can with the sand we have in our bar area. Whatever we can't finish with that bar area, it'll have to be trucked in.
How will that look different, assuming that we didn't have to redo the emergency berm? We're just going to do the traditional renourishing. How will it look different? Will the pipe just go further up on the beach, or how does it work?
Now, the
practically?
pipeline will run parallel to the beach, and then as the sand is being dispersed by a slurry, which is about 20% sand, 80% water, their bulldozers will do the grading and move the sand into position.
And advice for, and I know we've got a few weeks to go possibly, but advice for people who are living or businesses who are along the beach as this process is going on. It's obviously going to be disruptive, but it's going to be wonderful when it's done. Any advice for people, how long they can expect the activity in front of their property before they move on? Just any advice to anybody who sees these
Sure,
folks in
absolutely.
front of their property?
We love to talk about that at every meeting, and during our public information meetings, I had slides that showed it is a construction zone. And so they're going to be putting up some fencing that will keep people out of the immediate area. As that slurry is coming out the pipe, it's a heavy discharge. Please do not go near the pipe. What I encourage people to do is get your beach chair and go sit right next to the fence and watch the show, because it's amazing to watch. But it is a construction zone. There are going to be alarms on the backup equipment. There's going to be heavy construction equipment. Please do not walk past the fence and try to get into the area to get the first one to be to the new seashells. There'll be plenty of shells coming up. And so that's typically what we have. We have people who want to try to get past the pipe and walk, along the entire beach. We will do our best to have a path for people to walk, but it's at some point you may have to come off the beach, walk down and come back on the beach. So there's just some places it's too narrow to get everybody by. And so we just ask that everybody be patient with us. They're going to bury the pipe flush with the grade at very high use areas. The hotels, Lynn Hall, Crescent Beach, those are the kind of places where they'll probably just bury the pipeline. But that pipeline will be in place the entire project, as we've talked about before. That comes from the bar area to the beach and goes down the beach. So they will advance about 100 feet a day on average. Some days it'll be more, some days it'll be less, but generally about 1,000 feet of beach will be the active construction zone. And then they'll move it down the beach. The pipeline stays in place. Where the pipeline's not buried, they'll put little sand ramps over the pipe to get people across to walk safely down to the water. And so for the first 30 days, the north end's going to be our construction zone. We'll move to, down to the Lynn Hall and Crescent the next 30 days, and then down past Newton the next 30 days or so. So the next 3-4 months, the north and central sections will be very active. And then when we're done with that, we'll move down to the south end and pump to the south end at the Leonardo Arms area further south. It's about a 3,500 long stretch down on the south end.
Last question, Mike, and I've repeated, I took notes months and months ago, something you said for Leonardo Arms, and correct me if this is still the case, if it's not still the case. At Leonardo Arms, that seawall there, the projection was the new sand would go out 200 feet initially and then recede naturally back to about 75 feet in a perfect world. Is that still the case?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Councilor King?
A few comments. Thank you for addressing the berm issue. Being at the extreme south end of the island, second year in a row that I think that berm saved a lot of the condos, especially mine down there, Islands End. You can tell the difference between the north and the south end of the island with those berms, especially adding Carlos Point and Castle Beach and all those folks earlier this year, late last year, earlier this year. It's just fantastic to hear, and thanks for addressing that. Question, do we have any idea how much sand we lost on the beach because of Debbie, and any idea of how this will impact the time frame for getting it all taken care of by the end of the year?
Not yet. We have to wait for safe conditions to run the surveys, because we will run the survey boat on the Gulf side, and then we'll have our land crew out there. So as soon as we have those numbers, I'll bring them to Chad. You can get them out to you. You'll have them before your next meeting.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Councilor Woodson?
I'm good. Incredible job. I'm like blown away by these two individuals that literally stayed during that storm to make sure that these pipes were in place. I mean, that to me is, talk about above and beyond.
That's not Employee of the Year.
Wow.
Even we need to do that.
Wow.
Recognize it.
I mean, that's amazing. Thank you.
When we're done, we can pat us on the back. Let's get it done first. But they did. I would imagine they had a steak dinner. If they didn't, I'll make sure they get one. So,
I'd
There
be
you go.
curious to know if they have any video footage that they tried to take. That had to be a rough ride.
yeah, I'm not sure. So
Councilor Safford?
So I just want to verify. So the construction area, let's say, is about 1,000 feet long, but you go about 100 feet a day. That's the progress?
correct.
Okay.
Those are averages.
Okay.
So, correct.
So your fenced off area will be that entire 1,000 feet construction zone,
Plus or minus, but
plus
that's
or minus, and then
correct.
you'll just continue it down.
That is correct.
The only question I have is, with all the sand that we've gathered, obviously since Debbie, is there a process or is there a possibility to sift that sand and reuse it? Or is it just something that becomes sandbag sand from now on?
We paid a lot of money for it, so let's sift it and get it back to the beach if it needs to be sifted. So we just met with the crew at Newton, and I asked them just for now to leave it at Newton, maybe behind the seawall, so we can kind of take a look at it. That's pretty clean down there, but there are other places that will have asphalt and other debris in it. But if it comes over here to the park, we've had it sifted before and brought back to the beach after Ian and after Adelia. So as much as we can recover, let's try to recover it.
Do we have any idea on how many tons of sand we roughly pulled off? I mean, how many of those big trucks went back there? I know it was a lot.
4 or 5 loads of the
Almost five.
big dumps. And it's all back here at Bay Oak. So
Right.
we made sure not to put it right back on so you could evaluate it.
The other topic for discussion that we don't have to talk about necessarily today, but I did photograph it again. There are 3 or 4 private properties that got completely rutted and scoured by Ian. It's all on the landward side, but the water obviously came up to the boulevard. So far, we've been focusing on the berm and seaward of the berm, but those are your weak spots right now on the island. So I've been talking to Chad about the DEM money. The grant that we got, $8 million, is allowed to use to recover from Ian, and that money paid for a lot of this sand. So think about, do we want to fill those private properties, those scoured areas, because they are a vulnerable area along Estero, and we can meet with the team and talk about that. But that might be something we could use where if the sand's not suitable necessarily for sea turtle nesting, we could maybe look at putting it in those areas and try to fill in some of those scour holes. Because again, after Debbie, I mean, I was here Monday morning. I wanted to come up Sunday night, but decided with the road conditions, you didn't need another person trying to get on and off the island. So Monday morning here, first thing, and then the water was still at one point lapping up at the boulevard. So
It's a great idea, but it gives me a little pause.
yes,
Legally, that gives me a little bit of pause about going, one, on private property, and two, are we then opening up ourselves to all the people that spend
yes,
tens of thousands of dollars of their own money to put on their property, and then those that have chosen not to do anything are now going to get, for lack of a better word, bailed out?
I think we need to bring it back as an agenda item. We've been talking to Chad about it, and I just probably got bring it up today because there are other uses for that material if we can't put it right on the beach because of nesting and shorebirds.
Is
So
this something maybe, Nancy, you could look at that falls into that red tag scenario as far as life and
Yes, I'll,
safety?
I'll follow up with him on it.
sure.
We certainly want to get those filled in, but
Yeah.
Or can we charge the property owner?
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
If we can do this under the red tag or whatever it is,
Yeah.
the safety issues that we're dealing with the other unsafe structures, does this qualify as?
Right. We don't want to do this entire program and leave a hole in the system
Right.
that would fail because of. So we want to bring it up, talk about it, bring it back to council at an appropriate time, and talk about those other areas.
Yeah, I think sooner the better if we can get it in front of us sooner than later. I mean,
Yeah.
we're in the heart of the season. If we've got sand like we've got sitting out there that we could use for
Right.
that, and we can go
So-
through the same process.
And to that point, we are placing sand on private property as part of the beach project, and that's you have construction easements
Right.
and permission from many property owners. Now, there are some in the central area, as we know, that didn't sign, that didn't want, they're low lying. And so, but there is a process by which we could get construction easements for that placement in a hurricane recovery scenario. So, and they are eligible for DEM dollars. So,
But to your point, Mr. Mayor, we can treat that as a neglected property. And we can approach it that way, Nancy. And it's just public safety filling in, and it's not
Yeah,
beach sand, as Mike said.
I'd say get it worked
But,
out and get it
yeah.
back to us as soon as you can.
right. We're not improving anything. We're bringing it back to pre-Ian grade.
Right.
So,
This thought of another thing. I know this is incredibly difficult. Chad, you might have a thought on this too. As you progress, there are certain significantly large resorts that are trying to function. Do you have any ability to communicate to them that, hey, in a week, we're going to be in your area, so heads up, don't plan a huge festival out there? Or,
we've been talking with them on a routine basis. The Pink Shell, Diamond Head, Best Western. I mean,
yeah.
Lee County because of the parks. Yeah, we have had routine meetings and sometimes daily communication with all these folks, especially when the pipeline came up and the initial pipeline, we had everybody. And so they have weddings that are scheduled and things like that. So we're working around those things. That's why the contractor's like, I'll just bury the pipe through these high use areas. And then in December, when we're done, we'll just dig it up and smooth grade the beach and till it and we'll be done.
That's great. Thank you.
So,
All right.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mike? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Mayor, I'll
Thank
move
all of you.
resolution 24-148 FDEP Hurricane Restoration Grant.
All right. We have a motion by Counselor King,
Second.
second by Counselor Woodson. Any further discussion? Counselor King,
Aye.
Counselor Woodson,
Aye.
Counselor Safford.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Adderholt.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. The motion carries unanimously. Next is resolution 24-149, budget amendment number 3, allocation of fiscal year 23 savings to emergency reserves. This is a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Lee County, Florida, approving budget amendment number 3 to the Town General Fund and Emergency Fund, providing authority and effective date. Joe?
Yes, Joe Anzak, Finance Director. So this is just a continuation then of my presentation, just to help explain these things. So regarding this, now that we do have the audited financial statements and we have the final figures, what the statements show is that we have an unassigned general fund balance of almost $3 million. And this was accumulated during FY23 as a result of less than budgeted expenditures. That was approximately $2 million of less than budgeted expenditures. And then about $1 million of interest that was earned. These savings were generated, well, partly to the fact that there were so many vacancies initially after Hurricane Ian. There was apparently several employees who left. But then there was also much of our expense that was being incurred immediately after Hurricane Ian was reimbursable. So it was all being charged to the emergency fund. So there was that period of time when we had less expense being charged to the general fund. And of course, then there were some aspects to it, like the Bay Oaks Rec Center and the pool and places that were not operational. So that was what generated the $2 million of savings. And then we also had a very large interest revenue earned during the year as a result of the higher interest rates. So all of that together generated that almost $3 million into the general fund that is available for allocation. So, and just then taking a look at what is the wisest use of that money, the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, they recommend that we maintain in our general fund a reserve of 20% of the budget. And so by doing the calculation, that would equate to about $2.5 million that we should have on reserve in the general fund. It's been the established practice of the town before I arrived to split that reserve into two smaller reserves. One would be the general fund operating reserve, and the other one is the emergency reserve. So it's two separate pots of money, so to speak, within the general fund. So by splitting that $2.5 million into those two different reserves, that would mean that we would need a balance of $1,275,000 in each. And so in order to bring those reserves up to that level, like comparing where they are before we do so and then to the target point, all that requires is adding $60,000 to the emergency reserve and $580,000 to the operating reserve. So we can use, out of that $3 million that's available, we would only need to take the $60,000 and the $580,000 to update those two reserves within the general fund.
Joe, before you move on,
Yeah.
you said it was practice before you came on
Mhm.
board to have these two funds. Is in your professional opinion, is that still the best way to do it?
It
Have
is. I
separate
mean,
funds?
it's common to have two different reserves like that. So, and so there's no reason to change it.
All right.
So just kind of moving forward with that. Now, in addition, we also then have our emergency fund, and this is the fund that we've mostly been operating out of since Hurricane Ian, and that's where all the FEMA reimbursements, the insurance reimbursements, all the emergency expenditures, so all the revenues coming in, expenditures going out, all of that's there. And then we had a very small balance to start with in that fund that kind of helped get us through those initial few days. And then as in a previous meeting I explained, we had to use other sources of funding for cash in order to meet our emergency expenditures. Well, since we still have about $2 million left of unassigned balance in the general fund, I'm proposing that we move $2 million of that into that emergency fund so that we have a significant amount moving forward into the future that would be there for our use. And this kind of, it really falls into place with what I was attempting to recommend at an earlier meeting, where it looks like really we need about a $3.5 million balance in total of all of our reserves if we were to ever have to experience another event like Hurricane Ian, where so much cash is going out that quickly. And so this would help that $2 million in the emergency fund itself, plus that $2.5 million in the general fund. That would give us like $4.5 million. And so this next slide kind of depicts it in terms of the figures. So that center yellow or greenish yellow column is what I'm proposing we allocate. So that's a total of $2.6 million. So it's this, again, it's a $60,000 into the emergency reserve in the general fund, $580,000 into the operating reserve, and the $2 million into the emergency fund. So that's what this resolution, if you approve it, would accomplish, is moving those monies into those reserves.
Councilor King, question?
None.
Vice Mayor Hall?
Joe, just curious, just to make sure I understood you correctly, is your ideal reserve fund, however you want to characterize the reserve fund, is the aggregate number 3.5 million? Is it 4.5 million? What would allow you to sleep better at night?
Well, to me, the 3.5 million was the minimum that we would need because that's exactly what we needed to get through Hurricane Ian. Of course, it's a few years later, things are more expensive. So the more we have, of course, the better off we would be. And there is still the aspect, we're still dealing with a lot of Hurricane Ian expenses for which we need upfront cash. So having maybe more than what we need would help get us through that period while we're waiting for reimbursement from FEMA.
Have you ever had the ability, I know you came in to this not at the beginning of this exercise, Hurricane Ian, I mean, do you have any sense of what the town of Fort Myers Beach had in reserves when we went into Hurricane Ian?
Well, I do, and
just ballpark.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because I think I actually presented that to you. It was very small. I mean, so it was like maybe $500,000 in the emergency fund, or less than that, maybe 360,000 in the emergency fund itself. They did have, well, like even as this would illustrate, where they had almost $2 million. If you look in that the audited balance, where you've got 1.2 million in the emergency reserve in the general fund, and then the 600, is that 80,000? 95 in the operating reserve. So we did have that, but only like 300 and some thousand. So just over $2 million is what we had.
Context.
Yeah.
Here. All right. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's all I've got.
Okay.
Council Woodson?
I'm good. We had discussed this before, so.
Council Stafford?
My only comment was, Vice Mayor, I think, to feel comfortable going forward the next couple of years, I think we should target 5 million. Just
I
because
would
of
too.
inflation and costs and everything else. And you have to realize that FEMA reimbursed everything. If it happens again, we have to pay 15%. Our costs go up.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially.
And that's true. And just to add to this, then this is like to put this in initially now from the savings of 2023. But then I'm also have proposed in this budget for 2025 that we put in an additional 435,000. It's just part of the normal operating budget to continue adding money to the fund. So that would bring it up to the 5 million by doing so.
No, I like it. I think it's a good idea. Thank you, Joe. Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-149, budget amendment number 3?
So moved.
Motion by Councilor Safford,
Second.
second by Councilor Woodson. Any further discussion? Councilor Safford?
Aye.
Councilor Woodson?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Vice Mayor Hall?
Aye.
Councilor King?
All right.
Motion carries unanimously. Next is resolution 24-150, temporary $8 million interfund loan to purchase the building. A resolution of the Town Council of Town of Fort Myers Beach, Lee County, Florida, approving temporary interfund loan to purchase property for new town hall, providing authority and effective date. Joe?
So to help give you some background on this, the town, as you know, has received an $8 million appropriation from the state to fund the purchase of property that will become the new town hall. The appropriation is being administered by the Florida Department of Commerce. It's in the form of a grant from which we would be reimbursed within 30 days after submission of the reimbursement request. So this is another case where we have to first expend the money and then we'll be reimbursed. So this, in order to finance that, we need to use our own cash.
So technically, we haven't received it. We've been approved for it.
Correct. So then in order to finance this, I have a proposal to borrow money from our existing funds, and this would just be a short-term basis. So I would think the longest period of time, assuming that no complications arise, would be about 6 weeks between the closing of the building and then reimbursement from the state. I mean, it may be a few days longer, but they've been very good at responding to our questions. So I have no reason to doubt it would take longer. But that, the worst case scenario, if you want to double that and say 3 months, but so if you look in that purple column, the second one to the end, that's my proposal as far as what I'm suggesting we do. So we would, now that if you've just approved putting all that money into the reserves, I'm proposing that we borrow from those reserves, and we take out $937,500 from each, the emergency reserve and the operating reserve and the general fund, and then we take that $2 million we just put in the emergency fund and we borrow from that. Then we also have almost $2 million in the capital fund that's accumulated. In the past, it was accumulated to be used for just the periodic replacement of equipment that occurs normally over the lifespan of usage for each of the departments in the town. And so that was accumulated, but there's not a foreseen need to use any of that funding right now, because so much is already being replaced through emergency funding and insurance proceeds. So to use the actual capital fund is not something that is expected within the next 3 months. So I'm proposing that we use most of that. We also have that $155,000 that's accumulated out of short-term rental revenue for workforce development. And then since the end of 2023, we have accumulated almost another $2 million of savings and additional interest revenue within the general fund. So that has accumulated and built up, so we can then borrow from that as well. So that accounts for the total $8 million, and that would be we would put that then into the capital fund for the purchase of the building. And then it would be reimbursed immediately upon our receipt of reimbursement from the state.
Just to clarify, the building is 7 million. The additional 1 million would go for the purchase of the land next door, the 7-Eleven property.
Yes.
The only glaring question that I have is, so I know that they'll be sending the money fairly quickly. What risk does that put us at for 6 weeks? And do we have a backup plan should we have an unfortunate event?
Okay, I'm glad you asked, because I have a slide for that.
I figured you probably did.
Okay, so actually 2 slides. So although we would be depleting our reserve balances that we just created down to $675,000, we also have the bridge loan. What remains of that bridge loan balance that is not slated to be used for this year or next year. And we also have ARPA funds, that both of which can be used within the language of the bridge loan agreement and with ARPA funds. It can be used for emergency response. So then that brings me to this slide, which will take what's left of our emergency reserves at $675,000 after borrowing from them. And then if you also include the ARPA funds that are available, that's almost 1.9 million. And then the bridge loan, that's almost 4 million. That gives us $6.5 million that we would be at our disposal should we need it during this 6 weeks to potentially 3 month period.
Yeah, I knew the answer to that already, but I'm glad you had it ready, because I knew people out there were going to ask that question. Counselor King, questions for Joe?
I guess I'm not clear. Insurance money, where is that on the previous town hall?
We have approximately $2.5 million of insurance money for the town hall and contents. So that would be used to help pay the difference between the $8 million grants and then the total cost of the building and the adjacent property, and then doing the remodeling that's necessary and the new furnishings that would be necessary for the building.
Okay, I just didn't see it in the slide, so I was
no.
confused and concerned, but thank you.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Holt?
Nothing additional.
Councilor Woodson?
I'm good.
Councilor Savory?
Can't charge your self-interest.
No.
See, okay.
Well, this was important because I think there's been a lot of misconception out there in the public that the taxpayers are fronting the, technically, I guess. It's not coming out of it, this is being taken care of through state appropriations and insurance funding to purchase both properties and outfit them with whatever needs to be done.
Yes, that's correct.
And in such a short term compared to trying to build something and the cost of
Correct.
building
At a third of the
something.
cost.
I mean, yeah, I mean, this is, This should, I mean, in my mind, this is a no-brainer.
Do we have an update when we're looking at closing and things like that? Or?
Yes. We are hoping that our due diligence period will end tomorrow. We've received the survey that's under review. We are waiting for the environmental, which is a phase one. As soon as we get that, assuming, best case scenario, that there's nothing that requires additional analysis or investigation like a phase two, we would then be proceeding to closing the following week. We're setting it up for technically a closing on Friday, the 16th. But you never know. As you've gone through closings before, it's hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. We got to do this. And we all get poised and ready for it. And then there's an issue that comes up, but we're hopefully we can resolve if anything comes up. So I would say, if not next week, the following week, because it's a pretty clean transaction. The title looked good.
Thank you.
And then what about the adjacent property, the 7-Eleven property? What's the due diligence on that?
I have not heard back yet. We've
Still
sent them the letter, so they have Mandy, you might want to brief them a little bit on that.
We had a 45-day period to do our due diligence, so that's happening. I don't know that we're going to need all of it. Frankie is working on getting some of the other things done, just like this property, to make sure it's clean. We'll do the title search, which we're sure it's going to be clean with the 7-Eleven company. That's not a problem. We don't anticipate any issues with that. So that I'm anticipating probably something in the middle of September with that one. So by the end of September, we will be, new owners of a new home and a place to park.
Right. All right. Any further questions for Joe? Thanks,
Just
Joe.
thank you for all your work.
Yes, very good job. Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-150 temporary $8 million interfund loan to purchase the building?
So moved.
Motion by Counselor King,
Second.
seconded by Counselor Woodson. Any further discussion? Counselor King,
Aye.
Counselor Woodson,
Aye.
Counselor Safford,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Adderholt.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Joe. Take a quick 5-minute break.
Perfect.
Okay, we'll come back at, what time is it? We'll say 10:50. Next is item I, resolution 24-151, budget amendment number 4, authorizing ARPA funds for emergency outfall repairs. The resolution of the town council of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, authorizing the use of $104,929 of the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds to reimburse the stormwater fund for emergency expenditures and eligible for reimbursement by FEMA, and amendments to the fiscal year 2024 budget related to the reimbursement and providing for an effective date. Joe?
Okay, this is relating to an older item that, it's already come before you. And I just want to give you a reminder of what this was. So there were emergency Crescent Street outfall repairs that were performed by Andrew Site Work. This was a few months back. The emergency expenditure was about $105,000. It was ratified by the town council on June 3rd. So that portion of the documentation that was necessary regarding that emergency expenditure was all taken care of. At the time, we weren't sure if this would be reimbursed by FEMA or by the SRF loan, but because it was not part of the original Tier 1 project planning and fell outside of that scope and was not pre-approved by the state to be part of the SRF loan, it couldn't be paid for that way. And because it was something that was an emergency from our perspective, and it was because Andrew Site Work was here and they were doing similar work for us, and we had that contract for the Tier 1, it seemed appropriate to utilize them to do that work. But for FEMA standards, it just wasn't clear that they would necessarily reimburse us for that. And so rather than take the risk of it not being reimbursed, and while we still have the ARPA funds at our disposal, it just seemed best to apply the ARPA funds to it because they can be used for emergency expenditures such as that. And so that's what this resolution is doing, is to approve the use of ARPA funds for that expenditure.
Okay. Councilor Safford, questions for Joe?
No, sir.
Councilor Woodson?
Good.
Commissioner Michael?
Just real quick, Joe, after this 104,000 in ARPA is expended, how much of the ARPA money is left? Ballpark.
About 875,000. Well, that's a lot that's not already been earmarked
Right.
for other uses.
And the feds are going to allow us to have that linger for how much longer?
Well, we have until the end of this calendar year to obligate them. And so I've just been trying to hold on to some of it as long as possible, just to make sure there wasn't some unexpected need that we didn't have. But as we move closer and closer to the end, if we don't have any needs, and we're getting to the end of the year, we can always apply it to our general operating expense. And so it's not that we are at risk of losing them. It's just how we use them.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilor Kane?
None.
I do not have any. Thank you,
So
Joe.
I have one, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have one question that I just thought of. So the ARPA fund, even though our budget goes October 1st to September 30th, the ARPA funds are actually on a calendar year.
As far as the federal government is concerned, yes.
Okay.
But this money came back in like 2020. This is like a 5-year program.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
COVID money.
Yes. Yes.
It came. That's what it's
All right.
about that time.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution 24-151 budget amendment number 4, authorizing the ARPA funds for emergency outfall repairs?
So moved.
Motion by Councilor King,
Second.
second by Councilor Woodson. Any further discussion? Councilor King,
Aye.
Councilor Woodson,
Aye.
Councilor Safford.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Choked.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Hope. And I'm an aye as well. Motion carries unanimously. Next is resolution 24 dash, you gonna make
I think so.
Heimlich?
it? Next is
Or the
resolution
Heineken maneuver?
24-152, budget amendment number 5, allocation of community enhanced fund balance. This is a resolution of the town council of the town of Fort Myers, Beach League County, Florida, approving budget amendment number 5 to the town general fund and other funds providing authority and an effective date. Joe?
This, the Community Enhancement Fund is the fund through which the reimbursements from that $10 million capital improvement loan were funneled. And so that was for the projects that were previously approved, specifically for that loan. That was like for the Bay Oaks Recreation Center, I believe Times Square, Bayside Park. So it was for those projects. That loan has expired at the end of May. And so anything that we could have used it for, it's all what we could have used it for. It's been completed. And so there was a balance left in that loan from an accumulation of reimbursements that we received. And the reason why that happened, why there's a balance in that fund, is because some of the expenditures for which we were reimbursed weren't actually charged to that fund. And so this is more of like an accounting housekeeping type procedure where we just need to move those reimbursements back to the funds where those expenditures occurred. And so, but because it means transferring funds from one fund to another, it requires town council approval.
Okay. Council King, question?
None.
Vice Mayor?
Just real quick, Joe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but use the term loan. It really could be described as a line of credit, correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
that was how it was commonly referred to. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Council Woodson?
None.
Council Safford?
None at this time.
And I did not have any. Thanks, Joe. Is there a motion to approve resolution 24-152, budget amendment number 5, allocation of community enhancement fund balance?
So moved.
Motion by Councilor King, seconded by Councilor Safford. Any further discussion? Councilor King?
Aye.
Councilor Safford?
Aye.
Councilor Woodson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. That motion carries unanimously. Next is the final one. It's resolution 24-153, budget amendment number 6, purchase of the new town hall and acceptance of grant. A resolution of the town council of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Lee County, Florida, approving acceptance of the Florida Department of Commerce grant for new town hall and related budget adjustment number 6, providing authority and effective date.
Mayor, this one's going to have to be moved to the 19th. Joe will explain a little bit about what it is, but we're going to move to the 19th because we don't have the document ready yet. We thought it would be here. It's
Okay.
not. So we've got to make, there's still some moving parts to this. You'll explain a little bit more, Joe, what it is.
Yes, we placed this on the agenda in the hope that we would have the actual agreement from the Florida Department of Commerce for for it to be reviewed and then for it to be authorized for Andy to sign. But we don't have it yet. We should have it by the next council meeting. And so that was basically what that was about. And then that would be an appropriate time to also do the budget adjustment, recognizing that additional revenue.
Okay, so you need a motion from us to table this till the 19th?
Yeah, to reschedule it.
Reschedule, okay. Is there a motion to reschedule resolution 24-153 to the next meeting, August 19th at 9 a.m.? I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Aller, seconded by Councilor Safford. Any further discussion? You want a roll call vote for this as well? I'm an aye. Councilor Safford?
Aye.
Councilor Woodson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Aye.
Councilor King?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next is final public comment. Anyone here that would like to speak for final public comment? Anyone in the back? No?
Mayor, the speaker that was scheduled earlier is here now. If you guys want to hear him now. Up to you.
If he's here now, oh, yeah. That's, anybody have any objection to that?
Jim's.
Oh, that's for the M&P, right?
It was originally, but they had asked him to come earlier and he wasn't able to make it at the beginning. But you can do it now or you can do it for the MP.
We'll close public comment then, since nobody's here for public comment. And then if the speaker would like to come up and do the presentation now, we'll do that now. That's you?
I think we need to get somebody on the phone as well, so I think Jacob's going to have to help with that.
Or would they prefer to do it?
Looks like they're on.
Oh, they're on?
Yeah, he was speaking to Jacob during the break.
Just by way of background, Len is here. I'll let Len introduce himself and his team. Normally, we would have formally presented this at a council meeting to have this be on the M&P calendar, but it was during the break, and Frankie was kind enough to meet with these gentlemen while Andy was out of town, and we had a very good, productive meeting. And I think that my colleagues will find this of interest. And so we just sort of Frankie used his power to put it on the calendar, which I supported, and it's just a little unconventional, but it was just because we were having this 6 week or this 4 week break. So, anyways, so they're on the agenda. I've been meeting with these folks for about 5 to 6 months and discussing this issue, and I think it might have some merit for the island. So, with that, Len, I'll let you take it away and introduce yourself and your bona fides. By the way, Len probably won't mention this, but he used to live on Fort Myers Beach for a time.
I was going to mention it, Jim.
All right. And before you start, Nancy, because this is actually on the MMP meeting, are we doing anything that this presentation was actually for the MMP meeting?
No, this morning, I think when you did setting the agenda, there was discussion about adding this presentation
Okay.
to the regular council
right, we did
meeting,
do that.
so you're okay.
I want to make sure.
Yeah.
Take it away, Len.
All right. My name is Len Januzik. I'm a member of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security, as is Tom Silkey, who will be talking a little bit here, and he's on Zoom. I want to make something clear because there may have been some misunderstanding initially. The task force is not moving this project forward. This is being moved by a consortium of both task force and non-task force members, including a fairly large company, which I'll get to in a second. So what I'm here to talk about is a project that we are proposing for Fort Myers Beach to harden the grid on the beach as a bigger project or a pilot project for hardening the state of Florida. And let's see, how do we work this thing? Well,
You want to give him some Joe's a master at that. There we go. You went the wrong way.
There you got it.
there we go. I don't know if you can see that. So there's three groups involved in this. The MITRE Corporation, which is a large company, and they would be a general contractor on such a project. They offer engineering and federal funding and research development projects for a number of government entities, including small towns, states, and even DHS and DOE and people like that. EIS is a company that's spearheaded by a fellow named Tom Silkey. He's got a lot of experience in government relations. He's an engineer and a lawyer, and he's been invaluable in discussing this across the state, both at a local and at a state level. And then I've got a company called J&L Resources, and my background is analytical and risk assessment studies, and I've been doing those for a long, long time. We did many of the studies across the country where there's been failures on the electric grid, including the Metcalf substation attack on the West Coast and the impacts of extreme weather events in the state of Florida, in the state of Texas. So I was also a member of the planning committee for NERC, which is the North American Electric Reliability Council. So some of the things we look at when we talk about hardening the grid are shown in this particular slide, and you can see there's quite a few of them: unplanned events, operator error, physical attacks, weather-related items, and even solar disturbances. When it comes to talking about the beach, we're actually most interested in the items that are highlighted here with the arrows. Those would be cyber hacking, terrorist attacks, and terrorist attacks include physical protection. So it may not be quote unquote a terrorist, but it might be somebody just looking to do no good. And of course, your biggest issue, the storms, lightning, hurricanes, superstorms, tornadoes, and of course, ocean surge, which I'm well aware of the issues that have come about in the last couple of years. So anyway, wanted to show you just why are we talking about the grid and why we're talking about the grid in Florida, not to take up a lot of time here. But this is a matrix that shows dependencies. And you can't see it real well, but the left, I'm going to show you an enlargement of that, so don't squint too hard. The left-hand column shows the infrastructures that are dependent on the infrastructures across the top. So this one's a little bit easier to read. And you can see that, for example, water purification, sewage treatment, natural gas are all dependent on electricity, which is in the first column. Likewise, if you go to the very last column, they're also highly dependent on telecommunications. So the theory here behind this matrix is if you harden the electric grid, you're actually hardening many of the other infrastructures as well. By the way, I'm told this is informal, so if you guys have questions along the way, just interject. Otherwise, we can wait till the end. So when we talk about hardening the grid, in general, most experts agree that it's almost impossible to harden the entire grid. However, we can harden the most critical locations on the grid, And that allows us perhaps to survive a horrific incident or to at least recover very quickly from those. To do that, we have to identify critical facilities. And critical facilities can be hardened by establishing what we call hardened microgrids. Now, maybe a lot of you have not heard the term microgrids, but it is basically an island. It's an electrical island, self-sustaining. It's a combination of distribution, of generation, of loads meaning customers, and resources include not only generation, but batteries and all different kind of energy sources like that. In talking about a development in Fort Myers Beach, we'd be talking about all clean energy resources. So that would be a real plus, I think, from your standpoint.
Would an example of a microgrid kind of be like a cell tower? You know, cell towers kind of have those little microgrids where they're battery backup and.
No, well, at a very small scale, yes.
Be more like a hospital.
Yeah, you know, a microgrid might be a campus or a military base.
Hospital, maybe.
Hospital's a possibility. They usually have their own generation, and they can operate without being connected to the rest of the
Do
grid.
they all have, like Dan said, do they all have backup generators, backup power, batteries?
Yeah, a microgrid, the one we're talking about, a hardened one, would have generation inside of it. So, and I've got a slide that covers this in a little bit more detail, but we'd be talking about, again, after we study and get some data from you guys, we determine what best combination of resources would make sense. But we'd be talking about micro turbines, which are hydrogen powered, for example, fuel cells, which can be hydrogen powered. This is all clean energy, photovoltaic cells, lithium ion storage batteries. And there's a list of other items too that we'd be looking.
I might be jumping ahead, but what would you define as an average microgrid? Would it be the encompass the entire island, or just a portion of our island, or?
Our expectation for Fort Myers Beach and our goal would be to supply the load on the entire island. And I'm going to cover this in more detail, but there's a lot of advantages to you, because right now, actually, let me give me a second.
Letting us jump in with questions.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm going to cover that in more detail. So
okay, great.
Let me move forward. I had to throw this slide in here. How important is the grid? It's the lifeblood of society. In essence, we can't live without it. And in fact, Dennis Quaid has made a movie for us called Grid Down, Power Up. And if you go down on YouTube, you can watch that. It's about a little less than an hour long, and it reviews and reveals all the issues if the grid were to go down. It is really well done, really well done. So how does this relate to Florida? Well, Florida is committed to protecting the electric grid. We've had a lot of discussions with the state talking about hardening the electric grid, and we've come to realize that developing a plan for the state is a lengthy process, an expensive process, and would take a considerable time and a lot of financial effort. So a pilot development of a hardened microgrid seemed like it would make a lot of sense, and that's why we're proposing Fort Myers Beach to be the place where that pilot takes place. A pilot like that can be built in a relatively short period of time and would serve as a template for the rest of the state as we move inland. It would also serve as a template for the barrier islands and other what we call virtual islands. What's a virtual island? MacDill Air Force Base might be a virtual island. So that's the concept that we're looking at. And obviously, I don't have to tell you, but I've shown this to other people, so I had to put this on there, but you guys got pretty much wiped out a year and a half ago. And I was actually down here, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it. And it was devastating. I still can't get over it.
So Len, how does the coordination work with, say, FPL, to distribute the power?
I've got more slides.
I'll wait.
So I expected that. So, but
Let's just not ask any more questions.
no.
Slides.
Go ahead, ask questions. But so here, we're going to get into a little bit more detail here now. So this is what we look at right now. And this is data that I've visually obtained. I don't have maps right now of the island. That would have to come from Florida Power and Light. But as you can see, there's a substation off the island up at the very top of this slide called San Carlos Substation. And it's my belief that that feeds the entire island. As far as I can tell, that's a radial feed into the entire island. It comes underneath the bridge and feeds the island.
And then I'm not jumping ahead on this one because you're talking about this specifically. When we were up in Tallahassee last year, we talked to Representative G. Lombardo about this because he was on the task force, and this was the talking point. So would that be part of the hardening, or is that a whole separate, different pilot?
The substation?
Yes.
Well, part of your issue here on the island, and having been here frequently, I used to have a place on Bay Beach Lane. My clocks would always be blinking every time I came here, and usually when I'm here, they'd be blinking every few days. That's because you guys are fed from a substation that's several miles away, especially if you're at the south end of the island. And you get a lot of what I call blips on the system from lightning strokes and whatnot. We would solve most of those problems. You would find your reliability of service. And I'm going to talk a lot more about reliability of service here. But I'm also going to talk a little bit about what this is going to cost. And that's the best part of this show. So let's move on here. They're saying San Carlos Substation. It's probably about a mile off the bridge, I'm guessing, right near Pine Ridge. It's kind of an older substation. It's there's a street view here. It's not very noticeable. And then it, of course, feeds across into the island, and you've got what I believe to be 12 kV feeders. They might be 13.8 kV feeders. Different utilities use different distribution voltages, but they're all basically in the same range. Those feeders run down the length of the island, and then there are attachments to the feeders that run down the side streets. And of course, on the island here, you only have one main street. Everything else is a dead end street. So I point out on this slide two particular areas of interest. One is the circle, which I believe is where we're at right now, and then the area down off of Linnell, where you have some public works and the fire department and whatnot. So those might be areas of interest where a microgrid could be installed. That would be subject to a lot of other pieces of information. And what we would propose to do is a scoping study first to gather all that data and then decide what the best way of moving forward is.
Would one location on the island be more beneficial than the other, or does it matter?
Well, it's going to depend on what data you collect. For example, I've looked at various ways of doing this, again, visually, and not having data from FP&L or from the state or from the county. There's probably some space underneath the bridge that we could make use of at the north end of the island. I believe that belongs to somebody else, but but arms can be twisted, obviously. And then, of course, with all the space that you have available right now, there may be some trade-offs that can be done to make land available. It may turn out after the scoping study is done that it makes more sense to have two microgrids, one at each end of the island. And that may support you better, and it may also fit from a land availability perspective as well.
And how large would be a half acre?
I've got something on that. Except, am I supposed to be pointing this towards something here?
Dan's head.
Dan's head.
Bounce off his.
No, it's just-
It's Wi-Fi.
Oh, my God. He's working on it.
Len,
Yeah.
this is Tom Silky. I just, before we got too far away from Mayor Aller's question, Mike Gialombardo was part of a group that looked at various resiliency issues for the state, for the legislature. And there are multiple programs and initiatives that affect everything from water intrusion to things like this. And so we have been in touch with Wes Brooks, who is the governor's chief resiliency officer. He's been helping us locate where the state has made commitments in the 2024-25 budget. And so some of what Mike talked about in Tallahassee may be included with what we're doing. I think there are probably other programs and other funds that have been made available through the state budget and state agencies that may be effective as well in helping Fort Myers Beach.
Thank you for that.
No, still can't advance this thing. Oops. There we go. So why put a hardened microgrid at Fort Myers Beach? Well, number one, the timing is excellent, unfortunately, but it is excellent. Your system seems to be pretty simple. It's a radial system, so that makes an installation like this very, very easy to put in. It's relatively straightforward. As Tom suggested, and he can add to this if he wants to, we've already talked to state and federal people, and there's a lot of support for this type of a project. And again, as a pilot moving on across the rest of the state and ultimately across the country. Pretty important here, because your project would be relatively simple, this can be completed in a relatively short period of time.
And I'll just supplement that.
I still want to ask the question, but I know you're going to probably tell it. What is a reasonable amount of time?
I don't have another slide, but somewhere between 2 and 3 years completed.
That's a long time.
Now, there are parts of this that we can implement as we move along. So, if you said, what can I do right now? In a month or two, we might be able to help you to a certain extent. In a year or so, we might be in a lot better shape. And again, in 2 years or thereabouts, 2.5 years, it depends how much the political pathway gets clogged up. We could be complete.
Also, Len,
Go ahead.
Council, couple of items. One is that Len is talking about some interim measures that would bridge the time span between what you have now, or the current situation, and the beginning or the implementation of any kind of microgrid, if you ever decide to go forward with that. Those bridging measures would be temporary or would be interim. They may be integrated into the microgrid. The time frame is also going to depend on what, if anything, the town decides to go ahead and build. Depending on the complexity of the system and the type of equipment and so forth, the time frame will vary. So that we can't nail that down real directly. I also just wanted to briefly supplement Len's last slide regarding the state and federal support. So I mentioned that Wes Brooks, Governor DeSantis's chief resiliency officer, is very, very interested, very strongly supports what we're talking about here today. Fortunately for Fort Myers Beach, your state representative and state senator, especially your state representative, Adam Botana, is on the committee that implements resiliency matters and studies this. So you've got somebody who's very knowledgeable. At the federal level, we've been building out, I've got a network currently, I'm just going to check my notes here, currently being built with the members of Congress, and federal agencies that may be relevant to this. I have been specifically looking for building relationships with anyone from Miami, around the Keys, and up almost to Big Bend. Right now, Gus Bilirakis, Carlos Jimenez, Anna Paulina Luna. I've been talking with their offices. Byron Donalds has indicated a strong interest, strong support for resiliency. The Department of Homeland Security, their Science and Technology Directorate, has been specifically tracking this project and our discussions about this, and is very interested. The Department of Energy and the Department of Defense is interested because it has as Len mentioned, this is a template potentially for MacDill Air Force Base and for other military bases and similar facilities. So there's widespread support. There's not a single person that I've talked to in the last 6 to 9 months who has anything negative to say. Everyone is supportive. That may not mean that they're willing to start a congressional appropriation, but there are funds available through FEMA, through CISA, other areas of DHS, the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and people are very optimistic about the support being there, both for the scoping study, which is this initial step, as well as the construction and implementation of any microgrid if you decide to go forward with it.
And I might add that General Bob Newman, who's about the third guy down on the ladder at DHS, has taken a big interest in this thing. So we talk to him fairly regularly. And
I talked to General Newman, and he kept me on the phone for an hour. He was so excited about the concept. So I was very impressed by that.
And with to supplement, MITRE Corporation is a federally funded research and development agency. It is one of the leading technology development agencies in this country. They are very, very keen on moving this forward and doing what they can to support it. That's why Len and I decided to partner with them on this. And I will tell you that I listened to some of your proceedings before we got started, and I was listening to the discussion of the sand repatriation efforts, and the two guys who spent the night on the beach when Debbie went through. And I'll tell you that our team has that kind of commitment. We will make sure that Len Januzik is on that beach all the time.
As long as it's not in the summer, middle of summer. I came down here about 3 weeks ago, and it rained every day for, I don't remember how long. And then,
So you're to blame.
well, no, then it cleared up, and then the Debbie came through. So.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But there's incredibly strong support at the state and federal level, and it's both deep and wide for this project in particular.
You can see why Tom's on this involved with this, because he's the humor as well as the smarts on the legal side. So
Lord help us.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, the next 2 slides or so are going to be the best slides in this whole group. So if you haven't been paying attention, now's the time to do that. Except, well,
Jacob, can you advance it form to the next slide?
okay. So what's the benefit to Fort Myers Beach? Well, we can talk about benefits in terms of improved safety, improved security, damage mitigation, and economic gains. In terms of safety and security, a hardened grid on Fort Myers Beach would at a minimum maintain critical services for the island. And this is especially true with natural hazards such as lightning, wind, and storm surge, which you guys have had your share of. So from our perspective, essential services include law enforcement, fire departments. I know you don't have a law enforcement department on the island, but you do have a fire department, medical facilities. Jim, I don't remember if you said there were. I think there might be a clinic or something.
Used to be.
Yeah. Public works, traffic signals, and street lighting, and lights for the turtles, and flood control. And that's a big item, freshwater and as well as wastewater. And we can actually even deal with small surges like we just had in trying to get the streets cleaned up faster as well. what is the benefit to Fort Myers Beach financially? So, number one, you avoid some of the economic losses that you would otherwise sustain if you lost power. I mean, so we've got a lot of little businesses here, especially at the north end of the island, and outages mean they have no business.
So, Glenn, real quick with that. So, would this cover just, I don't want to use the word catastrophic, but big events, or would it? So, like for instance, yesterday we had a power outage that affected like 700 people. Would this microgrid then step in?
Our intention would be that it would cover those 700.
It would. So it could be sporadic. It could pick up.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, let me carry on here.
All right. Sorry.
Recognizing that the town of Fort Myers Beach would be the owner of the microgrid, you could sell excess power back to the larger utility, which in this case is Florida Power and Light. You could offer premium power subscription to private parties, hotels, condominiums, whatever campuses you might have on the island. There, for example, I lived at Casa Marina. There's half a dozen buildings down there, so that would be something I would call a campus. And of course, offering premium power services to people means that you can keep the air conditioners running, which mitigates mold growth when you have a power outage, and that's a huge issue down here, and that's why that last bullet is on there about reduced insurance premiums. Now, summarizing what I said, priority number one is
Glenn?
obviously. Tom?
You missed one point on the last slide. Something that would inure to the benefit of all the residents and businesses on the island, if insurance companies knew that you were serviced by a microgrid, which would be your own privately, or not private, but you would own the electrical utility grid for the island, even though it might integrate with Florida Power and Light. Knowing that air conditioning would be maintained, knowing that damages would be reduced, we think it's reasonable to expect that the insurance carriers would be willing to consider reduced premiums for Fort Myers Beach residents and businesses in light of their additional security compared to other barrier islands and coastal communities.
Yeah, and Tom, I thought I said that, but thanks for reinforcing it anyway. So back to my summary here. Priority number one is obviously saving lives, improving security, protecting property and businesses. Priority number two is achieving priority number one by enhancing resiliency, meaning your continuity of supply. And priority number three is to achieve priorities number one and two at no cost to Fort Myers Beach. So I think that's a key feature here. Because this is a pilot program, we believe that all the funding would come from state and federal money. That, as this moves forward, that would obviously not be true in other locations. But you, as much as I dislike the fact that you were devastated by the hurricane, you are in the right place at the right time to benefit from a pilot program of this type.
So then moving forward, how would it work? Would it become its own utility, kind of like the stormwater fund then, as far as operating expenses and maintenance, and how does that get funded then? Would it go into another bucket in the town's budget?
Well, I'm not the budget person, so.
I guess that'd be probably policy decision.
Yeah, now, it's not untypical for a project like this for the utility to manage the lines and the non-generation part of a project like this, but you manage and own the generation resources, and that's the key, because you can then make some money for the town,
Sure.
Perhaps significant amount of money.
Which could offset the maintenance of the grid.
Oh yeah, easily. And
It
by the way,
also- it also may pay enough that you're able to hire a management entity, to manage the utility on your behalf. If more of these, if the state of Florida decides to really push this across the state, there may be a way to manage microgrids in a cost-effective way, so that even though you own it and it's subject to your operational control, the management responsibilities and upkeep and so forth would be, delegated to another party if you wanted to. It depends on what, if anything, you decide to build, and then it's yours to decide to do with as you wish.
Yeah, the bottom line is you would gain a lot more security or reliability, and you would actually be making some money coming in instead of money going out for the town. Again, the microgrid would be resilient to natural disasters, and you've seen and physical attacks, which are proliferating across the entire country. What we'd be looking at is a scoping study, which would be completed within the first 6 months. And we've divided this into two pieces. The scoping study, we would expect to be done in 6 months, and that would be funded by the state. And that would tell us, well, I'll tell you what it would tell us. It would tell us what the load is now and in the future, and load meaning the customer base. So right now, your customer base, I'm assuming, is quite a bit down, but it's going to go up, and it may, in a couple of years, it may take a real sharp turn up. It'll determine what power generation we can put on the island and where we can put it. And we would actually be able to tell you the economic benefits of that. We can evaluate the impact of impacting events such as potential natural and man-made hazards and disasters. We would calculate potential breakpoints. So we may not do this all at one time. We may do it in a couple pieces, where the first part would cover you for the next 3 years, and then the next piece would cover a period beyond that. And then we would analyze the possibility of smart grid management. If you're familiar with utilities at all, smart grid has been around for a little while. The utility version of AI. So it monitors the grid, and it says, I've got an outage here. I'm going to automatically switch circuits so I can restore power there. So we can implement some smart grid management in this microgrid as well. Now, where am I? Tom, do you want to talk about this last slide here?
Sure. So as I mentioned, the state of Florida, we believe is likely to support and fund the Fort Myers Beach scoping study. The governor signed the $116+ billion budget at the beginning of July, and as I mentioned, there are, in my discussions with some of the state officials, they believe there are several different programs or sources of funds and agencies and programs that in combination or individually would provide the funding for the scoping study, primarily because it would involve things like resiliency, water intrusion, mitigation, hurricane mitigation, et cetera. And it would really be a pilot and a blueprint for all of Florida's barrier islands, coastal communities that suffer from the same problems, peninsulas, and virtual islands. As Len mentioned, military bases are probably the best example. I'm being introduced to Kathy Castor's, Congresswoman Castor's resiliency point person. Her district includes MacDill Air Force Base, which is the home of Special Ops, and I forget the other special mission, but right. And a few of my classmates from the Air Force Academy are chomping at the bit there. I've talked to them briefly about what we're working on, and they're eager to see that implemented in some of the military bases, and MITRE has contacts in those areas as well. So this project will be a blueprint for all of those scenarios, all of those locations, and that could very well extend even beyond Florida to the Gulf Coast and the Eastern Seaboard, especially. So there's strong support in the state of Florida for getting this scoping study done and for looking at the feasibility of a microgrid for a community or an island like Fort Myers Beach. Then we have the federal authorities who, as Len and I mentioned, have been extremely positive. Again, nobody has voiced any reservation about moving forward with this type of project. And they believe that between the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, that it's reasonable to expect that the federal government would pay for the basically the prototype of a microgrid like this. And in addition to the Florida specific congressional folks I've been keeping in touch with, Senator Ron Johnson, who's one of my U.S. senators here in Wisconsin, is on Homeland Security. Carlos Jimenez, from whose district includes the Keys in South Miami, he's on the House Homeland Security Committee. They want to see this sort of thing being implemented for grid security purposes nationwide. So there are just all kinds of people who want to see this happen. And as Len mentioned, unfortunately for the town of Fort Myers Beach, you were ground zero for Ian, but it has provided the ideal location and circumstance for looking at this in the scoping study, and hopefully finding a structure that works for the community and as a blueprint.
Yeah, I would add that you can see on the bottom paragraph there that we're estimating the actual microgrid will be in the order of about $50 million. Again, expected to be paid for by federal funds. The scoping study would be somewhere in the order of $500,000, and that would come from the state. It may be less. I'm hoping it's less. I don't think it's going to be more than that. So, and that's a period of about 6 months that's going to take for that particular effort. So you're probably all asking, well, what does this look like? And I've got some pictures here that will be somewhat indicative of a microgrid or pieces of a microgrid, and I'm going to go through those relatively quickly here. That would be the type of structure that we would expect to put the main part of a microgrid on. Again, this could be a couple pieces, but it would be at least 14 to 16 feet above sea level, and it would be enclosed in a building up on the top there that would be shielding the critical parts to the weather and to other impacts that we might have. Again, the control building raised. This is a shoreline control building that we found someplace else, but it would be very similar to that. Batteries would be a significant part of a microgrid. Now, these batteries are on the ground, and most of them are. You can't do that along the ocean, especially with lithium-ion batteries. So these would be on top of the microgrid platform. Obviously, that platform would have to be pretty strong, but we've done that before. You can stack these batteries so that you can actually save some space by doing something like that. What else would be in there? Micro turbine. This is closer to a megawatt now rather than 700 kilowatts. There's a frontal view of it. This is a hydrogen-based micro turbine. Solar farms and rooftop solar. That's something that the study would look at in conjunction with advisement from the town. How much space can we make available for solar panels? A lot of people are doing them. If you go down 75 up north, you can drive a couple miles without leaving the solar farms. They may be rooftop. You could put them on the library. There may be space on the land that you can put them, or you can incorporate them into some new structures as well. We'll have to see how that pans out. This is a hydrogen fuel cell. It's like a battery, except it doesn't use battery acid and whatnot. This uses hydrogen. Frictionless flywheels. We would imagine that there'd be a fair number of these. They are typically buried and they're watertight, so they could actually be installed underneath the platform. They are a storage device, And one of the advantages of the frictionless flywheel is they have instantaneous response. So there's zero latency from a frictionless flywheel. And they would take out a lot of the blips that you now see on the system from various impacts that you get. Lightning, for example.
No latency.
And
zero latency.
Wow.
Well,
And
they're just like, because they're spinning, they're just like a generator. You get instantaneous.
Go
ahead.
And because they're not water sensitive the way batteries may be, they also could be placed in places like under the bridge. They could be placed partially underground. It allows you to vertically make use of the space you have by having something like this as a base, and then having equipment that has to be kept above a certain level above sea level, or is sensitive to water, salt air. You could stack these physically to take better advantage of the space you have available.
And just an example of this is a small microgrid. It takes up about a half an acre. Again, this is assuming ground level flat microgrid. Because we're going to be on a platform, we might be able to stack this up higher or do some other things to make the footprint smaller. You get some medium-sized microgrids that are 3 to 4 acres in size. I would expect that the one here would be somewhere in between those two. And again, it could be in a couple pieces. So the scoping study, just to give you an example here, there's probably 10 major parts to that. Identify locations and footprints for the microgrid, collect data on the project and future electric demand, identify possible generation and energy storage technologies for microgrid use. And we just went through some of those. Create alternative microgrid designs and architecture. So we give you some choices as to where you'd put them and what they'd look like and that type of thing. Estimate microgrid capital, operating and life cycle costs. So you'd know you're making money by the month or by the year because you're selling power, and then over the course of the entire life of this project, utility equipment often has a life cycle of 30 to 40 years. You'd have some balance of cost and advantage or benefit. Identification and cost of hazard resilience technologies and measures. Compare microgrid electric deliverability, reliability with existing reliability for island loads. That would be a significant difference in that one. I would expect your reliability would be astronomically higher. Compute environmental and climate resilience benefits. Identify legal and regulatory requirements, and Tom's gone down this path already a little bit, and then contractual reporting and final deliverable. So, next steps, feedback from Fort Myers Beach leadership. That's you guys. Feedback from the state of Florida, and Tom's been talking to the Chief Resiliency Officer, Wes Brooks, from the legislature if necessary, and then make any additional presentations as well. So, any more questions now that we've gotten to this point?
Well, I'm certainly glad you're here. Thank you to Vice Mayor Adderholt for picking this up and running with it. 2 times I've met with Wes Brooks. He alluded to this, and at the time we had met it was quickly after the storm, so it kind of fell on the back burner with everything else that was going on. So I'm thankful that you picked it up and ran with it, Vice Mayor Adderholt, and got it to this point, because it is a very interesting idea. And I'm personally a person that likes to try different things, and you can be the first at something that solves a bigger, greater issue. I'm all on board for it. But questions, Vice Mayor?
I just want to set the table just for what we're trying to accomplish today, because I know there might be additional questions. The goal today would be to have the council empower the mayor and the town manager to proceed forward in working with this group and or others, and then incorporate their desire for scoping study funds in their overall legislative strategy, because I know the town has a number of different priorities with the legislature, but to make sure that they're empowered to include this if they choose, and then just to empower the town manager and the mayor and our staff to move forward with this as they deem appropriate. And I just wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to see it, have their questions answered, and just allow this to continue to proceed forward as our leadership deems necessary.
Okay, you got questions for?
I don't have any at this time. I think mine would be probably next level questions.
Mr. Mayor, yield my time to Mark, our utilities director. Mark, I'm sure you've been listening to this intently. Do you have any questions? I don't want to make sure you're overlooked since this affects your world over there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great concept.
You need a microphone.
Sorry about that. Here.
There you go.
Whoa, heavy, right.
It's on.
Is it on? Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's an excellent idea. My concern is that it's still a saltwater atmosphere, storm surges and things like that. So how is it really going to affect it? Because we get our, looking at it from the water side, I'll say, we get our water off island. So if we have electricity here, we still have to fill up our tanks from Lee County Utilities, which is off island. So if they don't have that grid on their side and they lose power, you know, that's not, like I said, I'm speaking in a little small part just on the water part. How is that going to help us fill our tanks and pump it out to the citizens? So that
I
was
think,
kind of the
I think
first
the answer to
question.
that would be, part of the scoping study would be to look at the off-island needs that you have.
Yes.
To keep
Yeah.
those things up and running.
So that was just something I didn't see in there,
That's a
that
good question.
because we get our stuff from off island. And I know I have solar on my house. I have 3 batteries and everything. And Ian, it came right on. We never lost power or anything. So I had my own little microgrid and it was awesome. You know, my neighbors came with their coffee pots and the whole
So what
9
you're saying
yards.
is we're calling you.
Yeah, come on down. You know, I got room.
Yeah.
I just volunteered.
Now we know where the new future
Yeah,
party is.
exactly.
There you go.
So, but
Perfect guy.
I think the other thing is it's still a generator. So what supplies the generator? Is it going to be oil? Is it gas? Is it?
Well, it's going to be clean fuel.
Yeah. So LP gas,
hydrogen.
There's
a variety of different
There are-
options, and these would be things that we would
there are
itemize
technologies,
and give.
you know,
because then
part
that
of
has
what
to
we're
be
dealing
supplied
with-
to the island to keep the generators going.
Well, the generation, Mark, would ideally be located on the island.
Yes.
With the hydrogen and the battery storage and et cetera.
Yes.
And the solar, we'd have a combination of our own generation.
Yes.
So we really wouldn't need a traditional fuel source.
So that was kind of what I was looking at. Is it a traditional fuel source or is it something?
The other option,
Sorry about
which
that, I keep
again,
interrupting.
part of the scoping study would try to ascertain, is when I drive up to the island, I see on the other side of the bridge, Fort Myers Beach, this and that. You guys own any land on the other side of the bridge?
No.
No.
Okay, so, and you don't own the land underneath the bridge?
A portion of it.
Portion of it, okay. So, you know, the project could include supporting off-island facilities to keep you up and running.
The other thing to keep in mind is that the technologies in this field are developing so quickly, so that and this goes to one other point I wanted to make. The scoping study, in addition to looking at what the current needs of the island are, can work on looking at what the needs of the island may be in, let's say, 2 to 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. There's a decision made as to whether you want to build to that 2 to 3 year window, 5-year growth window, 10-year growth window, or merely have contingency plans as growth occurs to be able to expand the capacity of the microgrid. The technologies are expanding at the same time. And so things like the flywheels that Len was talking about for storage, just in recent times, those have become incredibly more efficient. And so we expect that the technologies available for generation, for storage, for distribution will change as the project goes forward. And part of the scoping study is to provide you with a deliverable report that tells you what you can do at that point. but with an eye toward keeping an eye on technologies as they change so that you can opt into other technologies as they quote unquote come online, no pun intended.
And I might add that our other partner, MITRE, who isn't here, their ultimate goal was to be able to supply the island for 10 years with microgrid power. So that's going to be coming out of the scoping study to see how close to that number we can get.
And MITRE has access to things that are not necessarily publicly available right now, whether they come from the national labs like Los Alamos and so forth, or whether they come from private industry, they come from internal R&D projects at MITRE in energy-related fields. They work very closely with the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and Homeland Security on technology development, both within MITRE and with contracting parties.
And I think just one other thing, just on a positive note, about selling the power back to FPL.
I like that.
My electric bill is minus $117 a month because I sell it back to else.
Anybody that out there is listening there, you're just perked up.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's like I see my electric bill. It's minus. Mine this month was minus $71. Even
Well,
though I had
and keep
people from Alaska that were there, my daughter and stuff, and the house was freezing the whole time, and yet we still sold it back. So that
keep
is a
in mind that the
positive.
utilities aren't very generous with paying you.
No, they don't
for
pay me a
your
check.
for your portion that goes
Right.
back to them. But
No.
the other concept of selling power to online on campuses on the island
Yes.
could be considerably more lucrative.
Could be so that was just a positive besides all the
Work for
other
those reserves.
yeah
In-
besides the other maintenance
in a-
aspects and stuff like that. So.
In addition, as Len mentioned early in his discussion, keep in mind that where you have, it doesn't even have to be a hurricane, but a strong water-related event, where buildings have to come down or large portions of them have to be structurally rebuilt because of mold and the effects of water over time because of a loss of power. If you can keep air conditioning systems running as a bare minimum, you will save a huge amount on property damage that will not occur because water has a chance to take hold along with mold.
Sorry, something just clicked in my mind. I believe you said in your presentation that the actual electric grid out there would be taken care of by the power company still, but we would be in charge of maintaining the generator.
Well,
part of it?
and you would probably contract that out to somebody
okay.
using some of the money that you're making.
Okay. I think that was the only other concern is if we have to maintain those generators, that's a big expense for the town. Yeah, exactly.
Anything else, Mark?
No, I think I'm good.
Council Wilson?
So just a couple of questions. You said this is a pilot program in Fort Myers Beach because we were ground zero is considered one of the main areas.
That's right.
Are there other areas that are being looked at or we
Uh,
are focused?
So obviously the other barrier islands have been impacted as well. And the advantage of a barrier island is that the grid is much simpler than on the mainland. We don't want to start with a hardened microgrid on the mainland in some place like Boca Raton or something like that. So the barrier islands make a lot of sense because it's a simple installation. There are some others that have been impacted. We have not. Well, I don't know, Tom. I don't know if you spoke to a bunch of representatives. I don't know if you spoke specifically to any of the barrier islands.
I have not talked to any other municipalities or communities other than Fort Myers Beach. I will tell you that Congresswoman Luna, Congressman Billy Rackus, Congressman Jimenez, the reaction I've gotten is they could see this being a critical safety and resiliency upgrade to their districts. And so they're looking at it from a broader standpoint, and they're looking at the state of Florida. But we have not talked to any other specific municipalities or entities like that.
And I might add, and I don't know if I emphasize this enough, aside from your exposure to storms, surges and whatnot, the state of Florida is a peninsula. So your connection to the rest of the world is limited up near the Georgia border. In fact, there's two 500 kV lines there. Typically, if you lose both of those lines, you lose load in the Miami area on the order of several thousand megawatts. And that's happened. I can point to numerous instances where that's happened. So state of Florida has a good reason to be interested in this.
So, and then I'm assuming when you're looking at this and you'll do all your work, but then you're looking at 10 to 15 years out, correct? Because right now I hate to say it like this, but it's kind of a shell, and there's going to be a lot more development that takes place. And how is that impacted, or how do you?
Right, and we
plan for
recognize that. So what we would do is a load projection within the study, and we would project what the load's going to be over the next 10 years and how it's going to grow. And obviously, you folks are going to have a significant input to that. We've got previous load curves we can get from Florida Power and Light. And typically, the loads are, middle of the day, they get way up there. And then especially down here with the air conditioning load. And then at night, it tapers off. And that's pretty similar across the whole country. There are a few exceptions, but so we would build a new load curve for you looking forward for 10 years and try to incorporate loads that you would anticipate coming, again, loads meaning customers coming online. And that would be the basis of our study.
And keep in mind that Councilmember Woodson, as you discussed, there'll be more building. It's worth considering who might consider building a high-end condo complex in Fort Myers Beach if they know that they are going to be better protected in terms of property damage and the safety of those residents because of the resilience of a microgrid being present on the island. That will enhance your marketability for things like development of that type.
So will those new developments then will they have any impact or costs with them as they develop, or is this, they would just hook into the grid?
They could be customers of the town.
Well, right.
Okay.
They would be customers.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for now.
Seven?
So I guess my number one question, I know you've got the microgrid control buildings, but we're still going to be using existing wires and cabling to get to the other places. Is that correct?
We would be using at least some of them. We may put additional feeders in. Again, part of that will be determined by where we anticipate the load to grow on the island. So the middle of the island is kind of bare right now. So, and it may turn out that we need two microgrids, and we could fit. They'd be smaller, but there might be two of them, one closer to each end of the island, and that might facilitate.
So it's conceivable to say if some of the lines went down mid-island, there'd still be a portion south end where those lines didn't go down, and still everything be working perfect.
Yes.
I would think you'd be better off putting one on each end.
Well, that's what the study.
Yeah, and it'll be a function. A significant part of that would be how much space we can have available.
Yeah, and what's crazy is you'd think, before the store, a couple of years ago, like why do we have wires and why aren't they buried? Well, find out that the buried ones were worse because of the salt intrusion.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
I've pretty much asked all my questions. I mean, I guess my only question would be, so from us, I think that the vice mayor laid it out pretty good. But politically, it sounds like we have a lot of ducks in a row with Congressman Donalds, obviously, Representative Botana, Senator Martin, Wes, obviously, has been in our corner. What can we do if we decide that we want to say, let's go ahead and go with this politically? Is there anything that we can do?
I'm going to defer to Tom, who's the expert on that.
Yeah, let me butt in here, Tom. What would happen if the council authorized the mayor and the town manager to proceed forward? There would be a partnership between this team and the town as we go forward and we do our legislative ask strategy. But also Tom has a strategy to work through the various state agencies themselves without doing an appropriation to receive funds for the scoping study as well. Then once the scoping study's complete, this team has relationships and assets at the federal level that would help, and it would be in their interest to help us procure those federal funds. So it wouldn't be incumbent necessarily on the town by itself to achieve both that state and federal ask. They'd be actively involved in that process with their relationships.
That's right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom.
And we would, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're up, Tom.
At both the scoping study and construction phases, the town wouldn't be making a decision about whether to go forward until you knew that you had the funding in place. At the state level, as Jim mentioned, and again, I'm basing this off of discussions with Wes Brooks and some other folks. The funds that have been allocated to agencies or in the name of resilience already would appear to be more than adequate to put in a request for the scoping study. And I think we could expect people like Wes Brooks and Representative Botana and Senator Martin to shepherd that process through and to be supportive. I think there are other people at the state level who will want to see this go forward because they want to see this become a state program or a template for the rest of the state. And the fact that it's coming out of programming and not a legislative appropriation means that the town doesn't have to ask the legislature to make any kind of a specific request.
Makes sense.
Right. And I might add that Tom had a conversation with Wes Brooks recently on this subject, and they spoke for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So he's very interested in this.
Well, I guess myself, I'm all in favor of this. I think going through that scoping study doesn't hurt anything. It gives us more answers to questions I think that we all have, and probably questions that you have. And so I'm 100% in favor of it. But what about you, Scott?
102%.
Okay, I'll take it at 103.
Oh, boy, we're getting there. We have 4. Okay, Efrat?
I'm comfortable moving forward.
All right. Jim, I think we know where you stand. Great. Yep. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you.
Look
This
forward
was
to the
great.
next step.
Thank you.
And please, if you have questions after the meeting, always feel free to reach out to us. It's a 3-member team, but we work very closely together. We kind of bring, by way of a little bit of background, I spent 7.5 years at the cabinet level in Governor Scott Walker's administration here in the state of Wisconsin with economic development in our state jobs agency. And I've worked with various programs and so forth. And so, I'm an attorney. Don't hold that against me, but,
That's
but
good
Yeah, that was a mistake.
That's strike 2.
yeah, well,
You had us right till then. Jim, see one of you.
I was an electrical engineer and a bartender before that, so I've got a better pedigree than it sounds like. But I have experience working on projects at where the state has a commitment to something like this, and to the extent that you all have questions, we want to make sure that if we can answer them, we will. If we can't, we'll help you find the answers. We want to see Fort Myers Beach come out of this way ahead. And it's, again, unfortunately, it's because of where you are and where Ian hit that you're in an opportune spot now. And we want you to help. We want to help you take advantage of that. So please make sure to reach out and let us know if you have questions in the future at all.
We'll do. Thanks, Tom. And just one last thing before you go, Skull Vikings.
Go Marquette.
I also represented Brett Favre for 18 years. So I'll as a former Vikings quarterback, I'll be supportive of the Vikings as far as Brett having been their quarterback for a period of time.
That's a great.
So now you guys
18
have
months,
mentioned
maybe.
sports teams, so I have to end by saying go Irish.
Oh, no, quick, turn it off. Turn it off now. Turn it off now.
Thank you. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Thanks.
Jim, can you make sure that?
Thank you, everybody.
All their contact information to staff to get. You already got it all. Perfect. Okay.
One thing we need to be mindful of, we've got some CDBGDR long-term recovery planning money that if we need to use that, we've got to find projects to use it.
That shouldn't be different.
So,
Okay.
We got money.
We'll move on with the rest of the agenda. Town manager items.
Thank you, Mayor. we've covered a lot of it, but we are in the process of preparing a letter to send out. FEMA's going to be sending out a letter for the National Flood Insurance Program, the 5,292 policyholders in town. We are also sending a letter, so we're in the process of preparing that letter to be mailed out. We talked about the 7-Eleven property and the town hall closure, but again, we can't overemphasize, and I've talked to each of you about this, and Councilor Woodson brought this up, the cost of new construction and the timing of new construction. That power grid could be in place by the time we got a new building built. Not really, but it would take probably another 3 to 5 years or more by the time we got this council to start planning, the next council to have their input, and another council to have input. That could get locked up in a political discussion, very respectfully speaking. But this kind of like circumvents that process, and also saves a lot of money. So we can do some of these other things. So we can put money in the reserve. So we can be prepared for that other rainy day. So just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. We have teams out now assessing Debbie. We have it's a declared emergency, substantial damage in the section 1205 funding, which is part of FEMA. So we're out now assessing all that. We have our teams out doing that as we speak. Again, I want everyone to be mindful of the traffic pattern that changed this morning a little bit around Margaritaville. You're now going to be turning on, if you're headed north, you're going to be turning on Crescent to go around behind Margaritaville. So it's going to create a different process down there. So we've got to also be mindful whenever we have a flood and whenever there's flooding in that area. So we've got to be on top of that even more diligently now. So pumps and things like that you mentioned a while ago, we've got to start addressing a what if.
How long will that traffic pattern?
18 to 24 months. It's as far as I know, it's the whole the project. I did
Yes.
not know.
Okay, just curious.
Unfortunate, but I think I haven't been told that there's a short term or a long term. So I would just assume that it would be the longer term.
Instead of assuming, can we try to reach out to
We will.
FDOT and see if we can get some, so we can let the public know how long they can expect to
As they do
turn left to
construction,
go
I would
right?
imagine they'll keep a one lane coming through and another lane going around, but we will find out for sure. And
If
we
you
will,
need the project manager's information, I've got it.
or Nicole will do some blasts about that and get that out there. Again, Nancy mentioned the closing date on the town hall. We're moving on that as quickly as we can so we can start those processes. Reaching out to architects now to help design and do some things that we need to do for the downstairs, but we keep that moving. We've got those that momentum now, so we're moving forward. So other than that, that's all I have.
So is it, because of the two properties, I assume we're going to be working at the same time. We're going to be doing what we need to
Pretty
do
much
with the new
plan that,
building
yes.
as we're.
We have a demo
finishing
company kind of under contract now to help with other things. So
Yes.
once we do that, we'll engage them to take the building down and start looking at that property, get it raised up, get some drainage put in, to do the things we need to design there. But we've got to talk to Nancy about the architects. We've called a few and they're not responding. So we might just need to, write a letter ourselves that we attempted with our list. Now we got to start calling others who might be willing to help us. So we'll have to talk more about that.
Just a quick follow-up. Frankie, you mentioned something the other day, and I don't know if it's ready for public consumption or not, but with the acquisition of the 7-Eleven property, not only is it parking for the town, but it might also provide advantages to surrounding streets, given some room that you'll now have to do some additional street improvements. Do you want to just touch on that, or is that not ready to disclose yet?
It's still being discussed, but it's no secret. We're trying to look at possibilities of having an underground storage facility or tank, so to speak, to take some of that burden off of Bahia Via. The access off Bahia Via off of the Estero is so steep that a lot of that water does not get catched by the basins that are there. It just runs right down the roadway. And even after Andrew's site work is done and puts the outfalls in, which I think that's all they have to do on Bahia Via, and connect the system up on that road, you're still going to have a large amount of water coming off of Estero on that street particularly. So by rerouting it to the back of the new town hall property and putting it into a storage facility, we could actually pump that to the north, or in this case, west end of the island, the next canal up, which actually sits almost about 1.5 feet higher than Bahia Via does. So you wouldn't have that. So that's all still stuff that we're talking.
I just thought that might be an encouragement to those people who live in that area now that they'll have a new neighbor.
Not only that, but I know Sarah would applaud this, but as we put asphalt or we put whatever on that parking lot, we need to control our water. We need to maintain, we don't need to push it off on the residents. So we're going to be we're going to be the good steward. We're going to set the example. So people look at us and say, oh, okay, you're doing the right things by putting the right drainage under the driveway, by doing things that others could do on their property. A little more money, but it helps your neighbor. Instead of pushing it down the road, we're going to try to contain it on our property. Coming off a building that really has no drainage going anywhere, that's kind of just running off. So we're going to improve what's already there on our property. So you add that big building that's contributing to Bahia now, and then we start and that change that water flow back to our property. That'll take some of that off of that. So then it perks out a little over long. If you look at what Mr. Richard did on his property on the corner of First, and I believe it's First, Third, and Old San Carlos, similar concept. We put holding tanks underneath, sort of like a big, huge French drain, catch basins. Yeah,
That's great. Thank you. Very helpful.
Anything else, Amy?
no, sir.
All right. Town attorney items?
No items.
No items. Okay.
Well, I've got one for the town attorney.
So do I.
Well, I just had a chance to watch the special magistrate hearing the other day, and I didn't know if you had any updates or comments from your perspective as to how that went and what we should look forward to or
Well,
dread
it
going
was-
forward.
It was a little disappointing to have the other attorney come and just throw out a whole bunch of legal citations unrelated to a lot of the facts that were present in the case. So I think it was a good call on the part of the special magistrate to ask for legal briefings. She gave the opposing counsel 10 days, and then we will respond within an additional 10 days. The longer they take, the more the fine accrues, because our position is he is in violation. And the fine will continue to accrue as of the March 18th date.
As I watched it, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. It's not just the fine, it's a doubling of the fine, correct? It's now up to $500 a day, is that?
That is what we are asking for, yes, because it is a repeat violation, yes.
Thank you.
And you're correct, Mayor. She hasn't quite made her final ruling on it yet because they've asked for additional time.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
But I've come across some additional historical information, which is quite interesting. So I'm really curious to see what their brief is going to say.
Okay.
And I don't know if I asked this now or whenever, but on the subject of e-bikes on the sidewalk, where are we on that?
It's on the agenda management.
Yes, we have
Oh, is it?
done
Okay.
some initial research on it, and I guess I need to coordinate with Andy to find out when we need to present it back to you.
Yeah, I think it was a 2-week term date on the agenda management.
Yeah. Yeah, we worked on it over the summer, so.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Scott, question?
I'm not for the attorney.
Okay. All right. Council member items and reports. Scott, we'll just stay with you now.
Andy, you had mentioned that there may be some funds available for Debbie. At what point, so just so the public knows, there's some times where we're not getting any help whatsoever, and there's other times where we do get help. Is there an easy to describe line in the sand, so to speak, of what triggers us being able to get compensation from the state?
Obviously, there's several factors, and it was the governor declaring a state of emergency. Then you declared a local state. Of course, now the federal government's even done the same thing, so that triggers a lot of the balls that need to be rolling. We are now collecting information. I've just been talking a little bit to Chad, during the meeting about some beach cleanup for some of the debris that has come up, the seaweed and things like that. So we're starting that. So that triggers it just as soon as the event hit. The governor did that earlier last week. We did it Monday morning. So those are the trigger mechanisms. And there was a question posed to me by someone this week, why do we have 3 state of emergencies? Well, they all have to fall under their umbrella. You can't have one and it just refers to all of them. They're all separate. So there's 6 more storms between now and the time the others do. We'll keep adding those because they all stand alone.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I guess just as a follow-up question of that, at what point, I know we have no idea now, but at what point is 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, hey, that storm, Joe, cost us X amount and that we had to pull that from the reserves. How long does that take to kind of figure that out. I don't want to hold you to, I got to have the information in 45 days or anything, but at what point can we determine what the cost of these storms are? And
Well,
because we had talked about, it was 3.5 million the last storm, and we were kind of looking at 5. So do we get some numbers in from each of these events on overtime and what's not reimbursable and what's being pulled out of the reserve funds?
Well, I'll be honest and say I have not really had a chance to take a look at it from that perspective, like from an overall perspective, because from what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, I mean, it's still an ongoing thing where we're feeding FEMA information, we're still collecting information. So I think with working with Tidal Basin, we may, now that most of the immediate response, is over and past and behind us, I think we can start looking at what we've collected so far. But we're still are collecting the information. When we have it, it's just not compiled in a way that we can maybe
So
tabulate
you're
it
saying
all.
we're still collecting information?
We
from
are,
Ian?
and we are.
Wow.
Yeah, we are.
Scott,
This is from Michael.
if you will, we've got
Okay.
our monthly report from Tidal Basin. As of now, the federal eligible amount right now is $19,891,530.68. So that's the federal eligible aid, which means you take and add the states and other on top of that. That we cost, which we don't have any cost basically with this storm, with Ian. There'd be state cost and federal cost.
Okay.
Right, they do have, we can get that breakdown to you. They have it broken down between Ian, the asks, the PA projects, Adalia, and now we'll have another ask for Debbie as well. They keep a running total of what we send upstream and what actually gets obligated.
Right. And then Frankie, for you, I know we'd spoken a couple times about, getting the pool reopened and getting funds from one of the acronyms. Can you update everyone on that, please?
So currently, it's one of those square pegs in a round slot. The only logical progression we have for funding right now would be through the CDBGR. So that's one of our infrastructure asks. We broke down 3 projects that really don't have, a lack of a better term, dancing partner to associate with. There's always a funding stream that opens up, and we stay on those. But the most logical path to get the pool redone, as good as it was when it was built originally, if not better, would be through the CDBGR. And those wheels have just started turning. They're going to have interim discussions with that starting next week, and that'll come to fruition probably in early September.
Great, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, Councilman Woodson?
Just one thing. I think I was remiss during acknowledgements at the beginning, but since Andy brought it up, is that parking lot on Old San Carlos and 3rd Street, which is John Richard's by Shipwreck. That parking lot, I hope, becomes the model for all future. I mean, it is beautiful. The work that they've done, the infrastructure that they put into that, even the fencing, the foliage, what he's still going to be building and doing his landscape. I mean, that is something that should become a model of what we look at when people are changing things or developing or want to enhance that. That is for sure an enhancement on our street, without a doubt. That's all.
Vice Mayor?
I just have one thing. I was contacted by Joe, who's a neighbor at Newton Park, literally a neighbor to Newton Park, and he had suggested, and I've since talked to a number of other people since then, that the town consider potentially through partnering with the Florida Land Trust, acquiring the Strandview property, which is right next to Newton Park on the other side. That would increase the size of Newton Park by potentially 1/3. I've seen numbers in the press as to what that property is listed at, and I don't want to say what it is because I'm not sure if that's exactly correct or not. But I just wanted to see if there was a consensus from my colleagues today to give the town manager direction to explore the possibility of potentially partnering with the land trust to see if we could procure that Strandview property to enhance the size and scope of Newton Park. again, creating not only a larger park, but also a larger view corridor on Fort Myers Beach at a time where we still have that chance to do so.
I would support that.
Absolutely support that.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
And Andy, if you would and I know the list is going on for a long time, but if you just spend a second and explain to folks how that partnership with the land trust would work if we had the opportunity to acquire that property.
Sure. We have talked to the land trust, the state land trust. There's several land trusts that are nonprofit or but it's the state. The state works that you actually purchase the land, you expend the revenue, and then they reimburse you 100%, but then it goes into a land trust in perpetuity and it can never be used for anything but a park. So that they have expressed to us in meetings we've had that they've got funding, they're ready to do so. They've asked us to look for property. This was about six or 7 months ago. So you just have to get the right thing. And sometimes we looked at houses and we looked at certain things, but this actually seems to be a good fit for what we are trying to do to expand our parks.
What would the next step be? Would it be our due diligence, or we just reach out to the land trust to see if they?
I think at some point we want to sit back and let them take the building down.
Well, no,
So we don't mess with that.
Planned. Yeah,
And
they have a
then
contract
once
drawn.
that's gone and they get it all cleaned up, and then we will, probably reach out to the owners and.
But I think it's listed for sale now, I guess.
Oh, is it okay? Well,
Yes.
we can work with the attorney and get all those things, and then I can also we can reach out to the state and let them know and let them start looking at that and just engage them in a conversation, which we've already started, but we'll brush that off and dust it off and have that conversation further.
That's great. Thank you. That's all I got.
Yeah. Councilor King?
I've got a couple things. Received an email, I think we all did, concerning the noise coming from Times Square, use of bullhorns or portable speakers, and if there's a way to control that. A suggestion I think made was permit for that. I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but
So over the summer, I was copied on an email, which I think you may be alluding to. And we did some research. There were some other ordinances from other cities that were provided to give us, a starting point, but we didn't take it the next step until we had direction from council. But we would be happy to look at your ordinances and see if there's any type of amendment that could be made to achieve the goal that you want to.
I would suggest we move forward with that.
Okay, we just wanted to get your permission
I would
before.
support that.
The other thing is more personal, but last month I moved up from secretary to treasurer of the Southwest Florida League of Cities.
Congratulations.
Good luck with that.
Money, man.
John,
Spell
before you
secretary.
glance over that, does that mean you're now in line in the chairs to become president?
On the year following that, I'll go up to vice president and then president.
All right, very good.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a couple quick things. One is getting a lot of emails and stuff. Everybody's obviously working so hard, and we're trying to keep the beach clean. And when the rack line comes up and it leaves that seaweed, and we've talked about it in the past, but it's never really gone anywhere. I would like to get support to allow staff to start working forward to see if there's a way that we can environmentally obviously clean that up. Because sometimes that stuff gets very big, very stinky, very. And I don't know if Chad can weigh in on this. If there's never really gotten a direct answer. Is it something that we could go through a process to be able to do as a town, or hire an outside firm that has the permitting to be able to do it sooner than letting it sit out there and then it's not a very pleasant smell when it does wash?
Yeah, we may need to get some easements. I don't know if that activity is necessarily covered under our construction easements. Depending on where the rack line is, it could be on private property. Therefore, we essentially be maintaining private property. We definitely have the equipment for it. By our code, once, if it's a storm created rack line, it's permissible to get it cleaned up. So
I just personally, I think it would be something just to help keep the beach as nice as we can keep it. With all the stuff that's deep washing up, sometimes stuff gets stuck in there that you don't see, and people try to walk through it. I've seen kids running through it, and I would be in support if everybody else would go along. And not that I want to give you more work, Chad, but if that's something that you could look into to find if there's a path for us to be able to do that, or if it falls under something we already have in place, to be able to keep the beach as clean as we can with those heavy rack lines that come up.
Yep, I have a couple ideas, so yes, sir.
Everybody okay with that?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Mayor, I've done that in a previous city. We had a contractor, actually called Beach Raker with a contractor, but it was the county's beach. So county gave us permission. So this is a little stickier, but we'll work through it and see what we can come up with.
Okay. And then the other thing I have is a local builder that will follow construction, who is building the whale, as we all know. I've been in conversations with them about the potential for a parking garage somewhere. They've been looking to try to do it for a long time. And they've got a couple locations that they're looking at, but I don't want to go down the road of having them put time and effort into it. One of the locations was obviously the old town hall property. But they seem to think they can make numbers work there with an interlocal agreement with the town as far as financially how that works out for town making money off of that. But again, without everybody being okay with at least seeing what they can come up with, I don't want people to waste any time or energy. But they've asked to reach out to meet with the town manager and I to put something together to bring in to see if it even makes sense to go to bring it for discussion in front of the council. So I'm just seeking if there's approval to at least have the conversation with them.
Certainly.
I'm open to
Seems
that.
worth exploring.
Yeah.
And just one thing, thinking about the presentation we just heard, is that also a possibility for on top of that to have the power grid, the batteries or something that definitely would be strong enough and definitely would be high enough. So probably something to incorporate in other studies that we did as well. So
Well,
something to think about.
Follow Construction has been building on Sonic for decades, and
Right.
most people know who they are. And, the buildings they build have made it through the storm, so they know what they're doing. And I thought it would be a good partnership if it could potentially work out for the town and for them to be able to do it. So thanks for the support. I'll reach out to them and we'll see what we can come up with. And that's all I have.
Yeah.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, I forgot one thing. Okay, September 23rd is our council meeting and then also the budget meeting at 5 o'clock. Is it possible to move our council meeting to the afternoon before the budget meeting instead of doing a 9 o'clock council meeting and then a 5 o'clock budget meeting? Could we do like a 3 o'clock council meeting or something and then the budget
If
meetings
you
and
can
go
get it done
straight
in 2
together?
hours.
Well, they're usually,
time's close.
they're not a very heavy agenda on those.
On those days, there's usually not. I mean, we could do it, we could actually do it for both if we wanted to, because September 9th is the other meeting, but on the 23rd, I'm running into a conflict in the morning. If there's any way we could move the council meeting to the
I'm
afternoon.
not saying this, but you could also do the budget meeting and right after that, do the council meeting. Of course, you'll be here till, 9 or 10 o'clock, but that way you guarantee not to have to stop and start if you had an issue.
Oh, that's true too. You could start the council meeting at 5. and
30.
No.
then-
You'd have to do the budget and then the council
5:01.
after that.
5:01.
I'm not saying we do that, but I'm just,
It isn't a bad
that way you
idea.
don't have to interrupt right in the middle of the, oh, wait, it's 5:01, we got to stop. But then we're right in the middle of somebody's presentation and then
Right.
boom.
Yeah, a lot of cities do that.
Just work it backwards.
Because of the
I would-
budget.
Yeah.
I don't have any issue with it. That's what we need.
As long as it's just once, because I know how
Yeah, it would
these
just
guys
be,
will get.
it would just be the one
Look at 'em.
time.
They're hungry now.
Just the 23rd meeting?
Well, for me, it's just the 23rd. I don't know if anybody else wants to change anything else. I think it's easier if we just have to change the one meeting versus both for the public and everything. But I'm open to that. The 23rd is the only one I'm running into difficulty with.
Anybody have any?
So this, as it stands now, the council meeting would just follow the budget meeting on the 23rd.
Correct.
That's fine.
It has to be US. And usually the second budget meeting is a little bit shorter.
Right, because everything's been
discussed.
discussed. Right.
Okay. Yes,
All
sir.
right, thank
So,
you.
to Vice Mayor Adderholt's suggestion or topic, just like with the town hall building, I have full authority to go make offers on things pending your approval. So that's just, we'll follow the same type of process.
I wanted to give you that authority. Yep.
It's
There's something
halftime.
else. We got food.
All right.
Halftime. Let's
Anything
move to
else?
adjourn.
We got a motion to adjourn from Counselor King. Seconded by Counselor Safford. Any further discussion? None. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We are adjourned at 12:31.